Welcome to the December 10, 2019 meeting of the Evanston Preservation Commission. We have a quorum of 7 members of the commission. Just informationally, if anybody's here for the matters of 2390 Orrington or 2404 Ridge, the applicants on both have requested they be continued, so we'll have to proceed with a formal motion to continue them. But just, if anybody was here for those, they will not be heard tonight. If you are not an applicant and you wish to speak tonight, please sign the sign-up sheet. We need to record all names and information for anybody to speak. The meetings are videotaped, and so you need to speak into the speaker or you won't be on the tape. So if you do have anything to say, please come up to the lectern and speak formally into the microphone. The procedure we'll follow for each matter will be the applicant will have an opportunity to present their package, showing us materials they presented, and any other materials they wish to show the commission at this time. We'll then have the commissioners ask any questions they have of the applicant, then ask the applicant to have a seat. We'll then give members of the public who wish to speak about that matter 2 minutes to each to speak. I'll try not to hold up the name tag telling you there's 15 seconds left, but if the honor system doesn't work, you'll see this magic tag be held up. It's all, the meeting could be a long meeting, and so we do ask that everybody try to faithfully limit the amount of time they speak so that we can hear from everybody tonight. The first matter is 2390 Orrington Avenue, which the applicants asked be continued to our January 9th meeting? 14th, I'm sorry.
January 14th.
January 14th meeting. So we'll need a motion to continue. Elliot?
I move that we continue the case of 2390 Orrington Avenue, application 18 Pres 0147 until the next meeting of the commission, January 14th, 2020.
Second? Ken second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All were in favor. The second matter, this is old business. The matter we heard last time is 747 Michigan Avenue. Gary? For both the applicants and any members of the public, if you could start your presentation by saying your name so it's recorded on the videotape, even though you've signed in.
My name is Gary Shoemaker. I'm with Shoemaker Design Associates, and I'm here on behalf of 747 Michigan Avenue. We are back to present some revisions that were requested from our last presentation to this body. Is this working now? There we go. There's been no change to our application paperwork. Let's see here. When we met last, a couple of the comments that the commissioners had is that were one, that the proportion of the openings was incompatible with the standards. We have since changed the proportion of this. We've widened the 2 brick columns. We've narrowed these 2 transom lights. They match exactly the sash panels, which are adjacent to them. Can you do that later, Carlos?
Maybe not.
The brick molding is, again, identical to the brick molding around the existing windows. The lower panels are identical to the panels established on the front facade of the house. We believe this clearly meets the standard that the commission objected to in our last meeting. The other item that the commission had taken issue with was the addition of the Widow's Walk railings around the top of around the existing roof on the west side of the house, and our incorporation of those on this side. We have since eliminated the higher brick piers. That seemed to be a point of contention in our discussions. We have lowered those, continued the cornice work across. We still are requesting the use of the railing on the front and the rear. However, we have minimized the impact of that by reducing the brick columns on the ends. You see this is the west elevation, which is similar. The columns are a bit smaller. They're no longer proportioned to match the brick piers that we had proposed previously. We've revised our massing model accordingly. These sheets are identical to what we had before. And I also thought I would bring this as an example. There was some concern that we were trying to make this house look of an earlier period than it was. This house was built in 1913. These are examples of houses that were built in the mid-20s that all incorporate these. Most, if not all of these, are of the same Dutch colonial style. We're not trying to make this house look any differently than it ever had before. And I would also point out that this is a fantastic example by the National Trust of a house built in, I think, the 1700s. And you notice the two end porches. The front porch on the front canopy enclosure on the porch, the proportions of this house are very similar to what we have. The addition of these railings and this fenestration on this porch is considered an example by the National Trust of an appropriate way to modify a structure of this age and in this process. So with that, I think I've addressed the concerns the commission had.
Okay. Any questions for Gary before we ask him to be seated? Thank you. Were there any members of the public here to comment on this matter? No? Any discussion by the commission? Any points any commissioner wishes to raise? No? Would somebody like to make a motion to approve this matter?
Everybody looks at me every time.
Looks like Ken is reaching for his.
All right.
Go ahead, Ken.
I move we issue a certificate of appropriateness for the project at 747 Michigan Avenue, the demolition of the existing screen porch and construction of a new frame and masonry screen porch, and the installation of new wrought iron railings and new Widow Walk railings on the porches. Standards for alteration 1 through 10, construction 1 through 4, 7, 8, and 10 through 15, and demolition 1 through 6 all apply.
Second?
Second.
Susie, second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All were in favor. Thank you. The final matter that was continued from last time was 1204 Sherman Avenue. I'll take one.
Okay, these ones have just exact sizing of the windows on it. Does anyone else? Excuse me. I got it. One down here. Is that good?
Thank you.
All right.
Good evening. Thank you for having us back here.
My name is Achim Stolp. I'm the co-owner of the house. My wife unfortunately cannot attend tonight, but I have here our contractor, Luke, from CNL Ward, who will guide you through the presentation afterwards. Thank you.
All right. My name is Luke Knickerbocker. I'm with CNL Ward, and I also represent Anderson Window Corporation tonight. So I brought a sample of the window. Going through the slide. Go ahead. Okay. First slide is just showing the existing exterior condition. From what we can tell, it's just a simple 2 1/4 to 4-inch aluminum wrap, depending on the size of the window. We're looking to match that style on the exterior. Also, with the 400 series Woodwright that we're looking to install in place of this, it comes with matching frame depth. So with these older windows that have either weight pockets or metal pulley systems, this will replace that, and it should look pretty much the way it is existing now, in addition to then putting around that 2 1/4 trim on the outside picture frame, as you can see here. Here's a couple of examples, a couple of which that are in the field and 2 that are in the showroom that is located in Glendale Heights. These are examples of all work that we've done or that has been done through the Anderson Corporation. We are a family-owned dealership that represents them, like I said, out of Glendale Heights. Again, examples from the showroom on the interior trim as well. Looking to match up with what's existing, there is a combination of fluted, teardrop, but we are looking to go towards a farmhouse across the entire house. So switching that out, but we would have the 4.5 inches instead of fluted would be farmhouse on the interior across the board, just matching up with the existing. Here's an example again showing what I had said about that frame depth. Again, it's going to match up with the existing window frame. Now, the biggest thing with this is it comes with cladding on the exterior. So these are wood windows, which I'm going to show here in just a second. But the exterior is going to be clad in the composite as well as the sill on the exterior to allow drainage. On the exterior, instead of having glazing beads where they have inserted the actual glass into the sash of the window, it's aesthetically going to look like it was actually handcrafted with like a putty line, but that's a manufactured look that they've actually perfected with Anderson. The 400 series tilt wash is kind of a more familiar window, but this had came into play in the early 2000s because it matches up to the original architecture better than this tilt wash. And then on the interior, there is a hidden jam system with wood. This is just showing the anchoring and the process of how we screw into the existing studs, Jack and King studs. And again, we put a low expanding foam also around any dead airspace, and then put a rubberized material on the exterior and then cap it again with that 2.5 picture frame aluminum on the exterior. And again, these are just different examples that are incorporated into the packets as well, just showing how they match up with the frame depth. This was actually just a rough floor plan that I was given from Hakeem here, who received this from the realtor. Again, what you'll see in the packets will basically incorporate the windows that will be taken care of in the restoration. And then it goes into that. So the biggest thing will be showing you guys the window.
Great.
So again, you can see
Look, would it be possible to put it on top of the,
top of here.
yes.
sorry.
Is the insect screen on there right now?
Yes, yes it is. So that color will match whatever exterior color is on the outside.
Any questions?
Yeah, based on the details, this seems to be an extrusion of, I don't know whether it's vinyl or Fibrex, with a wood interior, so it's not a wood window even that's clad on the exterior the way you described it. That section appears to be a separate extrusion.
A separate.
Well, it's really well, let's call it an extrusion for want of a better word. There's an exterior half of each window plus a piece of wood on the inside. The issue I think that we've discussed, and I don't know if you were informed of what went on the last time, was the issue of it being a wood window. You're describing it as a wood window clad, but it's not even a wood window clad in this case. This is basically an exterior window of some hydrocarbon and wood on the inside. But our concern has always been, and I think, and I just reread the minutes, and I think what was brought up by several members was the issue of investigating the fact that this was originally a wood window and that the owner was to look into the potential of either restoring or replacing the wood window with a wood window.
So in this case, would you recommend a 400 series tilt wash because in that case?
Sorry, if you could speak into the microphone there. Thank you.
In that case, would you recommend doing a 400 series tilt wash because it's a wood core window? But I guess it's a line between the two is the 400 series wood core window, while it is made up or composed of more wood, it's only protected by a Flexacron exterior paint, which is a PermaShield type of paint, which it's thick, but this composite is a thicker extrusion, which allows for less maintenance on the exterior. And while it does have less wood on the interior portion, like you were saying, it allows for better protection on the exterior. It rates out better than the solid wood window that you're referring to.
I think this is an issue that we've all been discussing about. I guess historically it's been either if it was a wood window that it was replaced with a wood window, whether the wood window was restored and or replaced, one or the other. And I guess at some point in time, Carlos, you'll have to maybe tell us when aluminum-clad windows were accepted, but I have no idea. It was before my time on the commission.
It's been some time ago now. We had a seminar with the city, and we invited the State Preservation, Historic Preservation Office to give us some guidance, and that's when they announced that they were now accepting the aluminum-clad wood windows instead of all wood windows. The primary reason they gave at the time is because there was some issue in the industry with wood that was deteriorating really fast. In other words, it was a very soft wood, and they realized that it would not last more than 5 years to start to rot. So they decided to incorporate the aluminum-clad wood windows as an alternative.
I guess my question is maybe for the owner. Did you look into, I think that's what was asked last time by, I think it was Julie, but I can't be sure, about repairing, restoring the wood windows? Because I think that was that was a priority.
They are rotting, so there is no way in really. I cannot imagine how restoring of that would work like, and we would have the same issue like we have right now. That's why we thought with a model like this one that we would be within specification. That's my challenge in understanding that request.
Also, it seems like there's confusion, and you're referring to this not as a wood window, and I understand the reasoning behind that, but there is extrusions or milled pieces of pine on the interior, as well as the frame is composed of solid wood with a PVC cladding on the exterior. The only portions that are cladded with this Fibrex material is the sash as well as the sill that is slanted on the exterior. So this is defined, and I have brochures with Anderson here, as a wood window.
Yeah, Ken? Susie, anybody? I don't want to be the only one up here.
But does this answer your question?
I don't think that, I think you're missing the point. We don't even have any purview over the interior. To that extent, the interior, you've made a big point about the interior being wood. That's not even in our jurisdiction, if I can call it that. It's really the exterior. And right now, from when I look at this, at the drawings that you presented, all of what we would see on the outside and the model are going to be some type of a plastic material. Is that correct? There is no wood exposed.
No, and that's the
Okay.
whole point, to keep it as low maintenance as possible. So you're saying, I guess my question is, the only.
Me.
No, and I apologize. So I'm not trying, so is the only acceptable cladding then going to be aluminum? Because there's studies that show aluminum as an exterior cladding can provide more conduction and more heat transfer, more cold transfer during the winter months. The reason that Anderson really does not promote an exterior cladding with aluminum is because of these very reasons, and it's the same reason that they've came out with this composite material that is rot resistant on the exterior.
I mean, we've approved aluminum clad frequently.
Right.
So I think we've had discussions over the Fibrex, mostly because of the profile and the shapes and the way it looks in comparison to a historic window. I don't see how this window is significantly different from a metal, like an aluminum clad window, since it is a wood window with cladding. Obviously, it's PVC clad instead of aluminum, but I do think that the profiles are similar to an aluminum clad window.
I mean, the aluminum came before, I think, anybody now in this commission, as far as I can tell.
But I do think that that is now widely approved. It's approved by the state, it's approved
Well,
by.
apparently that was approved by the state, and I think we discussed, I don't think you were at it was a couple of meetings ago, about the idea that we should actually be having a discussion about the issue of all of the alternative materials that are out there. And I guess whether it be Fibrex and/or some
Agreed.
sort of vinyl.
I think at this point,
Not
though.
a pure vinyl window, which is, I think, what you had last time.
Last time we had a vinyl.
Last time he came in with an all-vinyl
Right.
window.
I read that.
This is a sort of quasi-vinyl window if you look at the detail.
Well, but in the meeting minutes that I read from the last meeting, it was discussed that a clad wood window would be a possible alternative.
so.
So they've obviously come back with that type of option. I think the question right now is a PVC clad acceptable, or does it have to be an aluminum clad? And how do those profiles visually look different in comparison to a historic
I
wood
don't
window?
know. I mean, I'm not looking at the original window. I think
Right.
you know, I think we can do that, and I'm not sure I'm averse to it, but I think that as soon as we are approving this, we've set the precedent for all future. I know, without the level of discussion that Carlos brought up, where it was asking the state and other preservation, let's call it commissions or agencies, as to what sort of, let's call it the national or statewide stance is. We don't have that here.
So the other Anderson window that you were mentioning, that's simply wood on the outside, it's not clad?
It's still going to be cladded with PVC, and it's going to have a Flexicron paint, which is like it's a thick type of paint that is applied like a PVC, where the glass goes into the sash. It's an older type of technology, whereas this was created, like I said, around early 2000s to kind of offset that and to allow more traditional look on the exterior, because the other one is a thinner profile on the exterior and is a more contemporary double hung, whereas this has thicker rails on the side that coincide with the traditional look that you guys are going, or well, that is on the house right now.
Does Anderson sell an aluminum-clad wood window?
They do carry what is considered an E-Series. That is, like I said, not a highly promoted product of theirs. And I mean, if you guys are to deem that this is unacceptable, I would go back to the drawing board with that. But I don't recommend that material. I've been in the industry, as young as I am, 4 years, and I got to say I recommend this material over that aluminum on the exterior.
If I may, I think the biggest issue for the commission, I think for the preservation community in general, is that the appearance of the material from us, you can see it from the outside. So we're not necessarily discussing whether it is free maintenance or no maintenance. Everything that, as far as I can tell, needs some type of maintenance at some point.
Absolutely.
So I think that if I were to advise the commission, I will just say that one of the things that was discussed at the last meeting is precisely whether or not aluminum clad is the only material that we accepted as a clad material, or there's other materials that could be eligible as long as, in my opinion, the profile, the dimensions, the glass area are a good match or compatible with the original wood window. So I don't know if that helps the commissioners, but have you compared, and this is what I asked in the application too, side-by-side drawings of the existing and proposed, where you can see the dimensions of the glass area, the meeting rail, the style of the rail, the trim, and then you also have a cross-section where you can see the profile of the existing next to the proposed. And again, we're not necessarily asking that you need to replicate everything, but it just be compatible. So when you look at from the outside, you will, not notice much of the difference from the outside at a distance.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if this product that you're showing meets that criteria or standard. In other words, do you have a way to compare side by side with drawings?
I guess my thing was, unfortunately, I did request drawings from Anderson Window Corporation. Unfortunately, with the timetable, it was kind of a quick turnaround. I was unable to get those side-by-side drawings. The best thing I could do was go out and take pictures like I did of their house, and then immediately go into my showroom, which we installed these windows, and take those pictures that were up here. And I have no problem going back through if that would help, as far as seeing what those profiles look like on the exterior.
I think what Carlos was referring to basically is in the same way that you've got a section, you've got a vertical section or a plan section through the window. What about a vertical section and a plan section of the existing window? That's all we needed. Didn't have to be painstakingly detailed, but we're not seeing the profile. I think that's what you're referring to, isn't it, Carlos?
That's correct. So, one of the things I hear constantly from people who want to replace windows is that either the owner doesn't have the knowledge or expertise to draw, and so that they will have to hire someone who could do that. But not all the companies like yourself have that expertise either. So they photograph, or they have sketches of something that, is what they represent the window as existing and proposed. We also received the manufacturer's cut sheets, which basically don't necessarily show the actual dimensions, just show the type of or style of window. So those are impediments for the commission to make a decision that will show them that what they're approving is compatible. Because a double hung window is a double hung window. It's just the detail that they're interested in making sure that it's a good replacement in terms of compatibility. So I don't know if you and your client can provide that so that this product or any other in your series that you provide will be a good match to the existing in terms of what you see from the exterior.
So I guess my question is, the profiles that in the pictures that I took of the elevations up there, plus the pictures that were right after showing the same profile, that's not adequate?
I think maybe you can illustrate what part of the house we're looking. I mean, if you go back, maybe you can give us more. So let's stick with the front elevation. There's 4 windows there that seem to be the same.
Yes.
So do you have a way to show that the replacement window in some way or in many ways is compatible with those windows in terms of what you see from the outside as a wood window.
From a sizing standpoint,
From the style, the profile, and the dimensions.
well, if we, I guess the one on the bottom left is the one that I would use as the closest reference point to what you're seeing right here because it's a standalone window. It's pretty difficult to determine what the profile of the front elevations are because of the picture being so far back. It was more so to show where we're replacing those windows. That's why I did the smaller picture on the bottom left that details what a standalone window looks like with an insect screen like it shows here.
Regarding the dimensions on the presentation we had last time, the previous company, they handwritten the dimensions on the pictures there, if that would help right now to go back there.
But these are not the same windows. In other words,
So for the windows, it's
the existing windows,
only the
yes,
existing windows,
yeah,
only the
yeah.
existing windows.
But you can use that information to include that in your application. You have apparently all the dimensions of the existing. You can use that and show us whether this window or another within the same brand is compatible with those windows.
So in the packet, there's sizing. Is that, I guess?
Yes, they're sizing the photographs. See, the thing is, visually, when you have a table with dimensions, it really doesn't convey what the appearance would be. So that's why we asked to have an elevation drawing of existing and proposed side by side so that they can see the dimensions of the glass area and the meeting rail and so on, versus just a photograph that has dimensions on it without comparison with the proposed. I mean, you can look into the next slides that I think they provided that, but the one that is after your presentation, the full application they submitted later. You can continue and see if there's anything there that will help you. There's more to it. Keep going. This is just background information on the house. So I don't know if these are the same sections that you have provided.
It's the same thing that's on there.
Okay.
It's the same thing that's in your
Okay.
packet.
Now, are there more in terms of photographs or anything like that of the existing windows that show dimensions?
No, there is not. Again, the only thing we have is the sizing that was taken by my install manager when he went out to double check all sizing.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
A lot of the windows on the existing house seem to have divided, well, let's call it divided lights, at least the upper sash, and go back on some of the photos. I thought they did. I'm not sure
There's no
anymore.
existing mullions or grills.
Well, let's say, they're, okay, now,
These are.
I don't know if these are all your examples. Do any of the windows on the house have divided lights right now?
None.
Because it seemed as if in this sheet that in this handout you gave us, some of them mention grill construction,
It'll say none right next to it. Our system makes us answer that question.
So
it'll
that
say none
insert,
next.
that page in your application that shows all the grill patterns and the widths and all the rest is not applicable?
Yeah, there is no grills to be replaced, and there's none existing.
I think the only grill, if I understand this correctly, is in the back door, which is not to be replaced.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it does seem like the materials are the critical issue, and it's a material we've generally not approved.
Well, I think Carlos raised the question of the, what is the profile of the window that's there now versus the profile that's being proposed?
I guess my 2 cents and why I feel conflicted by this is I think in terms of the exterior appearance of this window as compared to an aluminum clad wood window, the profiles and the appearance and the details are going to be almost indistinguishable. But the real difference is with this window, we've kind of got the Fibrex extrusion is the bulk of the mass and the wood on the interior is rather thin. versus the aluminum clad windows where it's kind of a massive wood and the aluminum is the thin kind of cladding element. So the proportion of the material has shifted in the core of the window, and I'm not sure how I feel about that.
I think the
I would
different-
agree with you, Ken. I mean, I've obviously repeatedly gone on record against Fibrix windows. I don't think that they look the same. I don't think they're appropriate for historic use. This home is a landmark home, so it makes it difficult. I do think it will be beneficial to discuss this in more detail. Unfortunately, I do not think that tonight is that night. So I think we have to carefully decide on how we move forward with this type of situation.
I think there's a lot of issues because I think one of the reasons that even vinyl, let's call it vinyl as some people view vinyl windows, they tend to get beat up pretty badly and the vinyl doesn't hold up. But one of the advantages when there's been a backing, or let's call it a wrap, I hate to call it a wrapper, but it is essentially a wrap of either aluminum and or vinyl, which were most of the earlier Andersen windows. Not just, I think, the 400 series, but even, I'm not sure about the 100s and all the rest. Has to do with the fact that it's really a wood core wrap. This is no longer a wood core. You can see it in these drawings. So this is, basically, it is an extrusion, like it or not. And I don't know whether maybe it's heavier and it's got more durability than, let's call it traditional vinyl, or the stuff you see at the back of TV guides and late-night TV ads. I hate to put it that way, though. And I think that is the difference, and it's something that we really haven't discussed to the extent that I think Susie's bringing up again, and that we brought up last week, or last month, I'm sorry.
With that said, then, I know that, I don't know if it was Carlos you remarked, but would you consider switching to an aluminum-clad wood window with one of their products that they have?
We could definitely go down that road. Again, it's more so from a recommendation standpoint within Andersen and within our company. This is the window that we promote more than the aluminum for various reasons, biggest one being conduction. So we would have no problem, visiting that route and seeing, obviously we would work that out with them and then be able to come back with that.
Do we feel confident with the information provided and with the profiles of this? Is the aluminum-clad window have a similar profile on the outside?
It'll be identical, only aluminum.
So if
extrusion.
we look at this window and this sample and we compare this profile to the existing with the caveat that it's an aluminum-clad window, do we feel comfortable that we could make a decision?
Well, I think we have precedent for that.
I would agree. So that way they can proceed and move forward, assuming that that's acceptable to the commission, and they wouldn't have to come back in front of the commission for
Well,
a third time.
we don't have, I think you're making all sorts of assumptions there, as long as it meets the profile, meets this, meets that, none of which we've seen.
Well,
We
it's the
don't
same
have-
profile as
We don't have
this.
that this profile, I mean, that was one of the issues. We don't know that this profile matches the profile of the existing windows.
Yeah, we have, and actually, I was looking back at your packet from last time. You have measurements, but they're actually of the interior, the last organization of.
I think they were primarily opening dimensions and not,
Yeah,
I'm not
it's
sure.
not that detailed that they measure every single part of it and have it done.
Right, with a vinyl window, a lot of times they're talking about cutting out stops and inserting inside of existing window frames. With ours, we're talking about a full frame installation where we take out existing
still.
weight pockets. Like I said, any space that would be, dead air space would be filled with the low expanding foam and then capped with a rubberized material on the outside.
I mean, I think we'd need to see the window. I mean, I have to be honest that the sample really surprised me after the presentation, and so I think it'd be better to have the actual sample here. I mean, the material has been the primary issue, not the other aspects of the window, and so I don't foresee any problem approving an aluminum clad window, if you could bring it back. Is that
As in bringing the sample back?
of the window that you'd intend to install, yes.
This is the window.
No, of the aluminum clad window.
Oh, of the other window. Okay.
If that's acceptable to your client. I mean, you obviously have to look at it and talk about price and everything, but.
Yeah.
I mean, pricing is one thing. If you
Yeah,
say
which-
now that it's not so good in insulation whatsoever, it's also a factor for us that our energy costs are affected by that decision, so we have to look into it.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, why don't we continue it and then hope that you decide that works out? Because, yeah, I think we're not,
I guess my question.
this issue has come up a lot, I mean, obviously including the prior presentation where this just isn't a material we've approved before, and I think we're,
I mean, if I may respond to that, actually, you referred to that discussion too, that you weren't, that last time you mentioned that you needed to have that discussion about you accepted aluminium clad, whether you also accept others, or whether you had accepted that, not. I didn't anticipate that to be on the topic again here, but okay, for that. My clarification now, what I need or what we need to prepare for next time. So the one thing is to discuss with him whether that aluminium cladding is an option for us in all directions. That's one thing, and we would come back and have a aluminium with that, given that we decide on that. Is there any other point we have to prepare for next time, not that we run into new questions?
If I may, I would strongly recommend that you have one drawing of your typical window. You have 4 or so
Yeah.
on the front elevation, which is the visible facade, next to the profiles and dimensions elevation of the proposed window. So that, and numbers are information that only is useful for measurements, but it doesn't show you the appearance. So I think that the dimensions on an exterior elevation, not interior, next to the exterior drawing of the proposed window, it will be very helpful. And I just want to also emphasize that when the state announced that aluminum-clad windows are acceptable, they also said that not all aluminum-clad windows necessarily will be approved because of the profile issue. So you have to also keep in mind that if in the line of products that you have, there's a particular series that is a closer match to what you are trying to replace, I will definitely encourage you to do that, to put the best possible match.
And that's what we feel like we've done. The problem, I guess my question is, so aluminum clad is the only acceptable, and it's not, there's still a gray area with that as far as the cladding on the exterior?
At this point, this is the material that the commission has approved for landmarks.
Okay.
Preferably, if you look at the ordinance, I'm sure you're familiar with it, is that whenever possible, repair, when replacement is necessary, replacement in kind, style, texture, material. So that's not changed, except that now the commission is looking at the aluminum as an alternative when the profile and dimensions are are compatible. Yeah, right.
Okay.
All right, why don't we continue I mean, if you have questions in the interim as you're looking at products, feel free to contact Carlos, who can give you.
No, but I think
Some
that were the
feedback,
important
so-
points for us. What would we
Well,
need to?
yeah, the cladding at this point. I guess I was unaware that that was the only allowed cladding at the time. I mean, he had mentioned that aluminum, I think, had gotten approved at a previous meeting, but I guess, again, just off of being in the industry, this was the window that I was recommending them because of various different reasons.
Right,
So,
we understand, okay.
Well, thank you for
Thank you.
coming over and presenting your application. But I'll, be in touch with you, hopefully be able to put together something that will meet your requirements and the commission's standards. I appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you.
Could I hear a motion to continue?
All right. I move that we continue the case of 1204 Sherman Avenue in the Lakeshore, I guess is it the Lakeshore Historic District, Carlos?
No, it's not in a district. It's a landmark.
Oh, it's a landmark, I'm sorry. Application 19 Res 245 be continued did we agree on it being January, or?
It's January.
Okay.
January.
Continue to the January 14th, 2020 meeting of the commission.
Second? Ken, second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. All in favor. All right, thank you. So moving on to new business, the first matter, 2404 Ridge, we need to continue to our next meeting. It's possible the matter will be resolved before that meeting, but we need to formally continue it. Aleka, do you want to move for it to be continued, since this is close to your heart?
I move to continue 2404 Ridge Avenue, application 19 Pres 0266. Do I have to read the whole? No. To January 14.
Yes. Second,
Second.
Ken. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All
Is
in
there anything different about that being a public hearing, Scott, in terms of even moving it to the next meeting, or it doesn't matter? Same public notice and all the rest?
Right, the next matter is 318 and a half Dempster Street.
Charles, can I hand out?
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
If it pleases the board, my name is Matthew Kerouac. I'm an architect working on the project at 318 and a half Dempster Street. The project is a unique project to myself and to everybody that's kind of encountered this, which makes it enjoyable and also a challenge to kind of get through the various processes that we've gone through to get to this point, and I'm sure through the permit application also. So a quick kind of review of what the project is. This was a stable built in about 1890. It housed 7 horses, liveries, kind of coach. It had grain and hay storage on the second floor with a very humble little living quarters up there. And at some point at the turn of the century, I think it was abandoned. There's a couple of permits that have been submitted for use as storage, as a garage. I think in 2006, someone may have tried to do what we're trying to do, is convert it to a single-family residence. And that's where we are with this project. We want to do an adaptive reuse of these stables into a single-family residence for my client. This is Dempster Street. The barn is located behind these 2 attached residences. It's surrounded and has a 0 lot line by alleys on the east, west, on the north, and on the south portion. So it's surrounded by 4 alleys. So that's a challenge just for us for utilities and all that, but we're working through that. There's really no change to any zoning issues. We are maintaining everything within the footprint. This is the existing first floor. It's divided. We have, you'll see in elevations, an existing garage door in the what we're calling the front, and the existing garage door in the rear. The horses were kept here, and then this was kind of maintenance area. I'm not quite sure, but kind of divided that way. The second floor, you had stairs coming up to the little living quarters. This is a beautifully lofted space, about 24 feet tall. And then this was a little hay chute, and then a grain bin, we believe, here. The roof, these are showing proposed skylight locations, but it's a hip with a gable end roof. The roof has an asphalt rolled paper on it. Our proposed, which will help kind of illustrate and explain what we're doing on the exterior. What we're doing is we're defining the residence by keeping where the horses were as our garage. We'll have a turnaround in here to get back out. And then we'll add a second, so this is existing garage door, existing man door. We're proposing to add another man door here to get to the primary residence with a in-quarter living on the first floor, utilities, and then stairs up. And then this is a glass wall to see the cars. On the second floor, just real quick, you come up, you have a common living space with a kitchen, laundry, pantry. We have a bedroom with a bathroom, and then the master bedroom suite here with a little lofted area with a spiral stair. So the little lofted area is kind of defined here with the little spiral stair coming up. The roof, one of the issues, we've worked with Anthony Rubano from the Illinois Historic Preservation Committee to get status, which we have got a preliminary approval from with 2 caveats, which I'll address in my presentation. You'll probably have the same issues, hopefully, and all will be good. But what we're suggesting right now, and I've worked with Anthony on this, because it's an asphalt rolled roof, which we don't want to keep as our primary, we're trying to work through what material is best. I have a sample of what he suggested and what we have accepted as our material, and I'll go through that once we get through the elevations. But the important thing for what I'm trying to show here is that on the north and the east and the west of the roofs, we're doing this metal shingle, and we're proposing to do a Tesla shingle solar on the south elevation. This is just a quick section showing the quarters, a little Exxon. So showing kind of what our impact on the existing structure will be. Here's our existing elevation and then our proposed. We are restoring all existing wood windows. We're restoring all existing garage doors, man doors. In a few areas, we're adding a window up in the loft here, which will be, this is that area here. And we are removing this window, and we will repurpose this on the other elevation you'll see, maintaining this window and adding this door that will get us into the primary residence. This door goes into the garage area. This is our garage door, which will be restored. Here you'll see the metal shingle. On the north elevation, the existing has these series of really wonderful small little punch windows with these segmented arch. And then at some point they added this window, and you can still see the segmented arch above. I'm so sorry. So this is the existing with, you can see the arches here and the 2 windows that they punched in. So in the outline shows where those were. We're going to restore that original elevation by bringing those punch windows back, maintaining this window and maintaining all the other windows. The skylights we're proposing, just because the space is so voluminous, it looks like we have a lot of windows, but for the space, it's very dimly lit. What their caveat is, and we will agree, is that this window is the one area that is seen from Dempster. So Anthony recommended eliminating that skylight, which we will approve. That's not an issue to us. They did not have an issue with these 2 skylights, and then the ones that wrap around. On the west elevation, we have the existing garage door again, which we will be restoring. We're restoring this. We're restoring the windows here. The difference that we have on this side is our kitchen is here, so we're maintaining this window and then including 2 more windows on the other side just to bring some natural light in. A tough part of this is because we're on a 0 lot, we have no place for the condenser unit. So working with Anthony, we have this gable end that we're recessing to put our condenser unit. So if I can just go back real quick, you'll see that in section. So that's right here. So we have this gable hip with a gable end. So we're creating a little platform at there, so it's out of view from most. You have to be like on a balcony of a building across to see that. He was happy with that location. We feel that it kind of provides the required, condenser unit force without impacting the structure. So you'll see that here. Here's our two little skylights here. And then on the south elevation, it has a wonderful little barn door that we're maintaining. Behind it, we'll put patio doors so that we'll open those up and have a patio door with a little Julia balcony in between. And everything else remains the same, restoring the windows. But this is where we'll have our Tesla shingles and then our skylights. The Illinois State Historic Preservation wants to see, and so do we, these Tesla shingles up somewhere before they approve of it. And we would want to do the same. It's a newer technology that my client is very interested in. So before that's approved by them, they want to see some application of it, and we agree with that. I'm just going through. Really, we're restoring all existing wood windows, and the two that we're adding, which are up at the kitchen, will be wood in kind to match the Pell Architectural Reserve Series. So we're able to match all the details. Just real quick, this is the existing. It's hard to get a straight-on shot because you're at garages. So a view from the northwest corner, southeast. So all these things have really wonderful little diagonal details on them that you can't see, but it's just a beautiful, in its heyday, I'm sure it's very beautiful for such a utilitarian building. Here's where that balcony will be behind these doors. You can kind of see the diagonals, which are wonderful. And then this is just showing where we are with the solar shingles here. And these are the two new windows in our condenser unit up above. We're not providing any screening in front of that. We thought that would be a maintenance nightmare, so he agreed just to leave that open. These should be rendered black, so the skylights are black. I sent you the wrong rendering on those. Then here's the restored elevation, north elevation. This is an up-close picture of what the Tesla solar roof shingles look like, their application, installation detail. And then just, again, this is just from their brochures. I don't have any actual photographs of it. And then the rest is just secondary information. I can show you real quick what this shingle that he has approved for us, or suggested for us. So this is the shingle. It's a metal shingle that he approved. We talked about, do we do wood shake, which was not appropriate for that structure. A standing seam was not appropriate. An asphalt shingle definitely wasn't appropriate. So this is the one that he suggested, Anthony Rubano. And I can pass this around if you want to. It has a very, it's really seen from a distance. You're really not having a strong relationship with the roofing material. And we were hesitant to go with this. We wanted something that's, but this was the only one that was approved by the Illinois, State Historic Office. So this is what we're proposing to do to our building. I don't know if you want me to pass it around, if it's, anybody need to touch and feel, or we're good? Okay.
What roofing material is on there now?
So now it's just an asphalt roll.
Okay.
It's just tar, almost like tar
Okay.
paper, yeah.
And then the Tesla shingles, the south facade those are on is the rear of the structure, basically? John?
It depends on how you define where, it would be the rear from the address location.
Right.
For us, it's the side. We're looking at the east as our front, but it is the rear. And you truly can't, it's all alleyway. So the most prominent corner you see is the north east corner from Dempster.
Right.
Is the prominent.
So the east, the front facade, the east is on the alley?
That's correct.
Okay.
They're all on alleys. That's
Okay.
truly. So, but that's on the alley going north-south off of Dempster,
Okay,
on the east side of the building.
okay. And so you don't have samples of the Tesla shingles?
They would not, they're not sending out samples of their shingles. That's a, trust me, I want to touch and feel that too. It'd be a new application for me.
How do the dimensions of the Tesla shingles compare to?
The Tesla shingles are more horizontal in their proportions, and this has a more standard shake proportion to it. I think from a distance, with the coloring, you're just going to see a horizontal line defining both of those roof lines. And that coloring is going to be as close, the Tesla is a darker charcoal. So you'll get that strong, that's a very strong horizontal without very strong vertical, and that's the same with Tesla. I'm sure there'll be, again, I don't quite know, but I'm assuming the widths or the heights of that exposure may or may not be as sympathetic to each other as I'm hoping, but you're never going to really see the two corners next to each other. It's going to be, it's such a, you'll never see that south elevation, I guess is my strongest point there.
Are we comfortable approving the shingles without seeing them?
Well, the other thing is the second paragraph up there. If you take a look at it, I was looking at it in the application. Kind of an interesting comment, whoever did the survey. Because they're pointing out that the roll roofing was probably the actual appropriate roofing for a barn when it was built, so that any shingle is already, whatever, deviating from what it originally was.
Yeah.
Sure, I'd advocate roll roofs.
Yeah, I know. We thought, we want to be, it's such a beautiful, it must have been a beautiful structure. So we want to honor that structure. We're doing everything we can to honor that structure. That's just a hard thing it's been a tough one to kind of problem solve, like what is, and that's where the gentleman, Mr. Urbano, came up with this as what he felt was the closest thing that would be sympathetic to the age. I'm with you. It is a struggle. There's no doubt.
I wonder whether I don't know what they would have had as roofing material back then. I'm not sure it would have been wood shingles necessarily on a barn, but I'm sure we see barns that way. It's kind of a brick barn. It's, brick barn it was really a brick garage from what you read in the original, the historic analysis of it.
Yeah, you can see the roof seems it's the nice thing, not the nice, but the advantage is that it's not a strong presence. That roof is not, it's worth considering and heavily considering, but to me, it's not making the statement as it does in the elevations when you're truly seeing the building, in real time.
Yeah. I think also trying to put it in perspective, we just got reversed 9-0 by the city council on the solar panels.
Let's not even talk about panels.
This is, in the scope of things, this is a far less visually obtrusive solution.
Trying to make points in the other direction.
I think this is just a great project, and I really think that it is something we should approve.
Yeah, I think if any building is going to be the guinea pig to see what the Tesla shingles look like, this is probably the best chance we're going to get, because it really is not visible from a normal.
Yeah, it's almost a shame to put $70,000 worth of shingles on something you'll never see. But that's the situation here. It's like putting a Maserati on your roof and not being able to look at it.
Why did you choose?
Or a Tesla, I should
Why
say
did you
Tesla.
choose this metal?
I did not choose it. I don't mean to push up, but Mr. Urbano, he suggested this as the only, I talked him through, can we do wood shake? No,
odd.
that gentleman suggested this.
It's an odd.
What was your original intent?
My original intent was a standing seam metal, which felt, and he's like, no, there's no way that would have been back then, and it doesn't represent anything to, to what the barn would have actually looked like.
That's really odd, because I probably would have thought the standing seam
Yeah.
metal roof would have been
I'm with you.
more of what somebody would have used.
Yeah,
back
and
then.
aesthetically, I like it better. I feel there's an intrinsic worth to a standing seam metal roof. I don't want to talk against something I'm showing, but those are the same issues I had. I don't like to do something, I'm saying if you're going to do something, do the true way of doing it. This kind of goes half steps.
I mean, I've certainly seen brick buildings of this type, the sort of semi-industrial buildings, and they would have had standing seam metal roofs long before I would have seen, either. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not going to go to clay shingles.
Yeah, and I would say this, I would want to advocate for what he's suggesting, because we're trying to get on the Illinois status, and so I'm balancing both commissions, and that's a very important one for my client also, is to get that. So we're working hand in hand with him also.
If I may, Chair. So if I understand, you want to be designated in the national register or the state
Not the
register?
national, just the state.
And are you, your client also applying for the tax assessment
Yes,
freeze?
yeah,
Okay.
the freeze.
So that means that the state will have to approve any exterior alteration?
That's what this is, so
Correct.
this is, yes.
And sometimes they look inside the interior for the public areas, so I don't know, that's
And we
another
did that.
matter.
We've done a tour of that with them. I've
Yeah.
spent days with them, and that's all been approved. Actually, in the letter, you'll see that the interior, they're kind of not thrown by this, but it's a unique project to them also. And for them, the interior is not a relevant point
Yeah.
to their judgment on this one.
What I was trying to say to the members of the commission is that in order to help the applicant to get the designation, I will recommend that you follow what the state is recommending rather than us trying to undo what the state, which is the highest authority.
Yeah, those are the
And as
nicest
a-
words I've heard all night.
As
That-
a
that's
certified
that helps
local
me.
government, the city is, with the state, we report to the state.
Right,
So-
yeah. And that's why I wanted to make sure that whatever we submit to you was first approved by them. I didn't want to go backwards.
Right.
And they do have, it's interesting, I don't know if I should be bringing this up, but I'll just bring it up. Because it's something is that the way that the Illinois state looks at this is like the man door that we're adding, they want it to look different than the original. They don't want you to reproduce something that's not original. Whereas I know this commission feels a little bit more of keeping that consistent. So we're going to do a balancing act there by maybe adding a window in it or something just to satisfy their needs, differentiating between an original component and a new component on the
They're
exterior.
going with the Department of the Interior. That's really the national standard.
Yeah,
I think would have been to make sure that door is clearly
yeah.
designated.
And just so you know, I just don't want to act like I'm matching it here exactly, because we're going to have to do something to that swing door, just to differentiate. They even said just a little window in it, just to differentiate it from the original.
Okay. We should probably keep.
I was just going to say that on the roofing, I can kind of see where they're coming from in that there could be other things that we could speculate may have been used on something like this, but I think this, along with the Tesla, will read as
Right.
kind of the kind of monogamous,
Right. Yes.
monotonous, gray that is
Yes.
there right now.
Homogeneous.
So, homogeneous.
Don't say-
Monotonous is yeah. Most architects don't like to hear monotonous, but that's okay.
Sorry, I couldn't think of that.
No,
word.
that's okay.
Homogeneous.
Yeah.
Did Jamie have?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Answered my own question.
Ken, did you? Okay. All right. Why don't you have a seat? Thanks for that.
Should I grab the sample just to get that?
No. Were there any members of the public who wish to speak to this matter? Now, is there any further discussion by commissioners? No.
I think we already have.
Would somebody like to make a motion for approval?
I move to issue a certificate of appropriateness to 318 and a half Dempster Street to restore all existing wood windows, garage, barn, and man doors and soffit, to install a new wood entry door on the east elevation and windows at the second floor on the west elevation, a new metal shingle roofing on the northeast and west roofs, and a new solar shingle roof on the south roof. Install new skylights and a new air conditioning unit at the recess west gable. Applicable standards include alteration 1 through 10.
A second?
Second,
Becca? Second.
whoever.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, all were in favor. Thank you.
And we had one abstention, Carlos.
Oh, I'm sorry.
One abstention from Beth.
Oh, I'm
She
sorry.
recused
Oh,
herself
that's right.
earlier.
Well, it's not an abstention.
So Beth, if you,
She's not here.
I mean, back and
An
vote as
abstention or a
abstention.
recusal.
217 Dempster Street.
Hold on, Mr. She will vote as an abstention.
Could have sent you out for coffee.
Okay, any abstentions?
Thank you, Beth.
I just want to thank you again. I'm on a board in my town, and I appreciate your time, and also thank you to Mr. Ruiz. He's been very helpful through this process, and he gave me some great suggestions to get through both commissions, so thank you again.
Thank you.
Standing scene.
Good evening. I am David Reno Ogden with Reno Ogden Architects, representing 217 West Dempster. I thank you for the opportunity to present some ideas here, and it's just cool to work on a house that has drawings from Burnham and Root, that drawings signed with Burnham and Root. And it's a beautiful old lady, and she's in pretty good shape. However, like most old homes, she needs a little bit of work in the kitchens and master bedroom and mudrooms. Those kinds of things are lacking in older homes. To that end, we're adding a small addition at the rear of the home for a mudroom, master bedroom extension, and a kitchen extension. And Burnham and Root initially planned for a wraparound porch on the drawings that were found in the basement on the front and the east side. The current home has only the covered front porch, which was lovingly restored in 1998. The new owners wish to bring back the wraparound porch and side stair, and porches are certainly a wonderful opportunity for signs of life and welcome, which is kind of a hallmark of Evanston. And all visible windows will remain and doors will remain. New windows that'll be on the back, which you can't see, will match existing in every aspect that we possibly can. And all added materials, of course, will match the existing. And the rendering, I think, which you have best illustrates our intentions. And do I have, let's see, how do I, uh-oh. Nope.
You should be able to press the arrow there up and down.
Ah. There we go. So there's the existing front porch. On the original drawing, show a wraparound porch fairly close to this size. The original bay was a little bit smaller. Then you can see just some pencil marks. They drew it on a bigger bay, and then the stair came down off the center of that bay. We're also continuing that around the back side. So we sliced out a 3-foot walkway to get down to the side yard here. They really have no backyard, so this is kind of their play area. So the stairs come down to the side yard through there. And the addition will come back right there. And then that terrace comes down and goes into the coach house, which the garage is back here, and the coach house above, which we aren't touching through there. Existing stair down to the basement back here, existing portico share here, which is all staying. And let's see. Whoop. Well, there is also an existing stone terrace that's here, which we're taking out and replacing with the porch sympathetic to what the original design was around the side of the house there. So there's the existing plan up here and the new basement plan here. Original plan, actually in more detail, as it exists now, original plan had a coal room for the furnace, a coal room for the kitchen, a coal room for the range, and then a wood storage down there. It's fascinating to see what this stuff was like back then. So there's the existing front porch, contains this wraparound porch here. The dining room stays just as it is here. Addition back in here for a mudroom. a little banquette for eating, and then the kitchen back in here, kind of knocking out the pantries and kind of chopped up kitchen that's there now. Second floor, again, at the addition, which is here, is for the mudroom extension. The bathroom goes into the existing bay there, and a little back deck that kind of matches the railing around here, the upper deck over here, with the porte cochere there, deck off the master bedroom there to cover the mudroom below. The south elevation, which is the street elevation. That's the existing covered porch, and we tend to wrap that around with the side porch there. We found these details are on the Burnham plans, exactly what the railings look like, the porch looked like, the siding, the screened openings below there are all on those Burnham drawings. And that's the existing west with the stone below, and then the new with the porte cochere that's here, addition off the back here. It's right there right now. So it's a covered porch there. Now we're taking that same space and making it an enclosed room for 2 floors there. Then here's the existing east elevation with the new, this is the existing stone terrace with a metal rail and a curved stair here. We're going to make that, again, a terrace to match the existing Burnham drawings and run across the side here, the additions in the back. All these windows, all these stay as they are. These are added, but you can't see those because of this big bay that comes out. Second floor stays just as it is. And there's really not much new from the back of the house is existing here. We're taking that porch there, adding it across for a little eat-in banquette, the mudroom, and the master bedroom extension there, and a little balcony to match the side porte cochere roof over there. And that's an existing photo there. That's with the Photoshop from a talented girl in our office. And that shows, again, that existing, which you can't really see now, it's kind of buried by plants, but it's a rather unique stone pier with siding going around it, and then little screened portals in the center of that, and that just runs on back, and the stair comes down. It's, again, the other rooms I talked about, the coal, all these furnace rooms through here. And that's the second floor. And there's, you can see that original porch that went beyond that and wrapped around the stairs coming down the side there. That bay got much bigger in the construction, and they did not build that little walkway above it. And this true is an old house, kind of a ghost of a print, but it's the best we could get. And that just shows that terrace wrapping around the side stair in the bay right there, which got, again, much bigger. And then that covers that porch area standing up here. The roof comes up and goes down and around. I've got the original here if you need to see it. That's pretty light. It's a pretty good reproduction, actually, based on what we have. Not a survey and blah, 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 the other stuff. Any questions or concerns?
Questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I, too, serve on a board in River Forest, our little suburb, so I know what these nights are like. You're going to appreciate your time.
Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this matter? No, I didn't think so. Any discussion from the commission? Would anybody like to make a motion to approve?
I'll do it.
Okay, Susie, please.
I move to issue a certificate of appropriateness to 217 Dempster Street for the restoration and expansion of an existing terrace with a stair to the side yard and an expansion on the rear elevation of the existing covered porch. Applicable standards include alteration 1 through 10, construction 1 through 5, 7, 8, and 10 through 15, and demolition 1 through 6.
Second? Lecca, second. So I was looking that way. All in favor signify by saying aye. Everyone was in favor this time. Thank you. All right. So the last matter before us is 548 Judson Avenue. The applicant, my understanding, is applying for both permission to demolish the existing structure and then also simultaneously for permission to construct a new house, which would involve, in addition to standards for construction, would involve zoning variations. We could, in theory, decide, I think we should decide the demolition issue first as a commission. Obviously, if we don't approve demolition, the rest of the, we don't have any other decision to make. But I do think it'd be more convenient to let the applicant present their entire presentation, both for demolition and for the new construction. And then why don't we let members of the public who wish to each speak for a couple of minutes to the whole matter, and then we can come back and just start with demolition as a commission. So if you could introduce yourself and please proceed.
Sure, thank you. Thank you. My name is Chris Turley from Turley Architects. I'm obviously the architect on this project. I have my clients here, Maria Nanos and Lynn Briskin. And this is actually kind of an odd experience for me because I've been in this profession for 35 years, and I've done a lot of renovation of bungalows and all kinds of older buildings, and this is the first time I've actually worked through a process where we resulted in recommending that a building be torn down. So it's kind of an odd experience, and I want to walk you through a little bit of it because we took a lot of different steps and finally came to that conclusion. So just to give you a preview, the issue with the building as it is right now is that it was originally 2 lots that were split into 3. And so instead of a normal 50-foot wide lot, we have 33-foot wide lots. And so we have 3 buildings on 33-foot wide lots, so they're kind of crammed in there shoulder to shoulder. The lot is undersized because of that, so we're well under the total amount of square footage, so we're not just narrow, we're also short. And so for an R1 with a 5-foot setback on top of that, we really are kind of crammed in. And so the existing building right now incurs into the side yards, and it also is very difficult to actually lay out in a renovation. So I'll go over that in a minute. And then there is that is the sort of the pre-existing hardships that occurred. There is a financial element of it wherein we found that it was very difficult to either repair, renovate, or add on to it in such a way that it would not be a building that was unsellable on the market. It would be well over a multiple of what is currently available as a similar home following each of those phases. So we looked at several things. We looked at the first option was do nothing, just sort of paint the place, sell it, move into it, whatever that option is. And what we found was that the building really is not in great shape. It has not been maintained very well, especially in the last several years since Maria's Aunt Stella passed away. But it's also, before that, it was really just not maintained. There's been no major renovation, no additions, no upgrading of any of the mechanicals, electrical, plumbing, anything. And so the building has been sort of not ignored so much as just weathering and aging in place. And so we found that there is just a lot of issues that need to be dealt with. The gable roof return, which we'll talk about in a second, is sagging. The front and rear bays are actually pulling away from the structure. We have water infiltration and rot coming through on the siding. We have roof and roofing failures, windows and doors that are no longer operable or weather tight. There's mechanical issues are at least dated if we're not quite sure if they're 100%. And there's, of course, no air conditioning. But the worst issue is that the brick foundations, this is a building that sits on brick foundations, and they're underground, and so they absorbed a lot of moisture over the years, and so they're really showing some wear and tear. At some point, we're not sure if it was original or subsequent, somebody parged the surface with like a concrete, and so that trapped a lot of moisture, and so we have sill plates now that have cupped and rolled and rotted, and we just have that parging is actually getting pushed off. It's off about 3 or 4 inches in some places. So what we know is that we're going to have to do some major work on those foundations and probably underpin them and encase them in concrete or replace them entirely. And as far as the front and rear bays, those don't have basement. There is no access to the foundations for that. So that's we would have to pin the building and then somehow excavate underneath it, replace everything, and leave the building back, or replace the whole end with a duplicate. So what we started seeing was that there's some major repairs, and that would be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the result would be a building that was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And so we would find that we would be priced out of any kind of market. Now, my clients intend on living there. This is going to be their home. But it would, at some point, it's going to have to go out on the market, and so, or be competitive in some way. And so the expectation is that the cost of the building would be, of repairs, renovations, or additions would be so high for such a limited building that there was no way to recover anything near that. So we didn't see that as a viable option of sort of repair or do nothing. We looked at renovation, but we still have all those same issues that have to be dealt with. And so we looked at whether what we found was that that the cost of renovating and or adding on was even higher, of course, because we still have to renovate, we still have to repair, rather, all those elements. And so what we found was that with all that cost, the dollars worked out that we could, when we look at competitive housing on the market for 2-bedroom, 2-bath, or even a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, if we can squeeze an extra bedroom in there, what we found was that the housing on the market right now averages out at about $385 for that model, and our renovation cost, addition cost, or add-on cost alone exceed that sometimes by half again as much. And it doesn't give us any value for the actual land. So it was a substantial increase in the cost. And then we looked at some of the other elements that, as we put on additions, would also come up. The building incurs into the side yards, so that presents zoning issues, building issues. We also have potentially some fire safety issues because we are in the side yards, and that does relate to fire safety issues. And so looking at replacing the siding would actually be quite costly because we would need something fire resistive in all likelihood. So we looked at and then we looked at the new construction. What we found was that the new construction was actually the most cost-effective way of doing it, and it actually got the building to be in its most viable, or the property in its most viable function and financial model. And so we developed that with looking at the historic preservation and with the neighbors and everything else, and that was actually where we ended up with this design study. We looked at the objections that people might have, because we were very present to them ourselves. And one is, this is a historic district, and whether, we started looking at whether we felt that, as the first step, whether we felt that the elements within this building really were related to historic or something that needs to be preserved. And we found that the building was reviewed twice for the historic preservation listing, and it was not put on the listing either time. In the 2011 resurvey, there were 3 elements that were called out that were related to to something that they noted. Not sure which button to push here. Here we go. And so the 3 elements, I think there's some better pictures of these, but I will show them this way, was a return end on the gable. You can see it a little bit right there. I'm not sure why that image is like that. But a return end on the gable, the front bay, and then I think there are 8+1 windows on the front. And so we started looking at that, and we started looking at the style of the building to see if we felt that it was contributing. We looked at the style, we looked at the significance of the building in the context of the neighborhood. We looked at those three historic elements. And what we found was that there were three buildings that were built originally. One of them has already been modified and added onto. The other two, as we said, are still close to their original form. We didn't feel like those three elements were in themselves indicative of any particular style, that they worked cohesively as a style that indicated some new idea or some new expression. And we thought that it was something that is actually still being built. Each of these elements are still commonly available. So we didn't see the historical aspect of it. We looked at as I said, how does this building work in the context of the neighborhood? And quite honestly, we're concerned that the finances or the financial model of this building does not bode well for its future. It's very hard to take this building, given its the physical parameters of the lot and the site and the codes that relate, and really do make an addition on it that will not actually affect the neighborhood even more significantly. So we looked at putting an addition on the top of the building, but in doing so, if we eliminate the area where the front bay is, there's actually very little of the building to work with in the back. If we wanted to put an addition on the very back of the building, well, we run into the impervious and lot coverage issues. The building is essentially at the maximum right now, maximum footprint. And we can't go down. We looked at going into the basement to see if we could put more livable space down there. And because we're already over the side yards, we can't put any windows in. We can't put any window wells in. We can't really get the egress that we need. And we would have to lower the floor again. And so it just generates a whole different set of issues. So we started looking at it, and we looked at the impact on the neighbors. And what we looked at was, in any scenario, there's going to be a major impact on the neighbors. We have to replace or repair the front bay. And so if the front bay has to be temporarily supported or torn down, then the garden and the neighbor to the south has a garden attached, I believe, to the building, and some other things attached to my client's building. Those are going to have to be removed anyway, and so in order to execute that construction. So we're already looking at major construction occurring in any scenario with this, and so it's going to have an impact on the neighbors regardless. So when we started looking at the new construction, we found several good reasons to permit this. First of all, the Nanos family, and Maria will talk in a moment, they've been on the block for decades. And so we're interested in keeping them on the block and in part of this community. Work to the north has already changed the nature of the three buildings. That's already happened. The city has already had several opportunities to put this down as a historic building and chose not to. We don't feel that the three elements are unique to this building in that neighborhood, or that it's unique historically, that they're still being built. The economics will not improve over time. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to economically renovate this building. I think we believe that a new building restores to the neighborhood a lot of the elements that are present, and that would be magnified. So we would have a fully functioning building for a family. We would have a coach house on the back for an ADU, accessory dwelling unit. That helps both with the finances, but we believe the vitality of the neighborhood as well. We think that it will enhance the neighborhood. It's actually a little narrower. It's the same footprint as the current building, and it is taller. But that height of the building, as you can see from the graphic, and that graphic is also available. I've forgotten which one to push now. There we go. That graphic is also available in the set. That is the new building. And the footprint, you can actually see that the footprint is actually similar to the existing footprint. And so, of course, the logical question is, why not keep the existing building? And it's for a few reasons. One is the foundations can't take an addition. The second is that if we're going to build, if we were to renovate and try to reuse it, we would have to gut and raise the roof in order to get a second floor on. There just simply isn't enough floor space to get all the functions that we would normally see in a building like this. We're just able to be a lot more efficient. So this is the gable return here. You can see it's sagging. The windows, and of course the front bay. This is the garage and the adjacent buildings. And this building to the north has had an addition put on the rear. The neighborhood has quite a few eclectic buildings and some tall ones. This is the building on the north corner. It's quite large. And then we have a variety of buildings on both sides of the block that are quite tall. I'll get into this graphic in a second. So this is the building, this is our new design for the existing building. This is the adjacent north building. I have shown the heights here. You could see, I wasn't sure if this was going to be clear enough, so I brought this graphic. It's the same drawing. But I showed what the actual height is related to the facade of our building, because this addition back here is pushed back, so it looks like it's lower than it actually is. This is the height of the adjacent building to the south. This is the height of, this is the limit, the 35-foot limit for the R1 district. We're actually about 6 inches under it. This is the tallest building. So next to the south, the building to our south is this Italianate building that has, that's the tallest one on the block, other than the apartment building towards the north. And when you look at that, and I'll give you this graphic here, you'll see that there are quite a few buildings that approach the 35-foot lot, or height, rather. I believe that's it. So I'll end with that, and then I'll let Maria Nano speak, if that's okay. Great.
Hello, everybody. I want to thank our...
If you could state your name for the...
Sure. I'll get right to it. I'm Maria Nanos. I wanted to thank our friends who have sat through an hour and 45 minutes to support us, who are all but two back there. A couple folks I don't know, but are all Evanston residents. I'm a social worker, and I live in Evanston. I've been here since 2003. And since I'm a social worker, I want to give you a little bit of heart of this story because it's our family and it's really important. But I also want to express our appreciation for this kind of a process to preserve, enhance, and enjoy the historic and cultural heritage of Evanston. Personally, I love old buildings, I love old churches, and I like old people. Which brings me to why we might be here tonight. I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a cold. Which is Aunt Stella, who Chris mentioned. Some of you may have met her in the community. I realize your focus is the property itself, the structure, the bricks, the shingles. Allow me to introduce you to the life, the family, and the love that happened at 548 Judson. This home was built when Aunt Stella was born in 1918. She was born in Michigan and lived her life in Rogers Park in Chicago. She was a first-generation Greek and talked about her childhood playing in those vast fields west of McCormick Street, which were literally fields when she was a kid. That's when this house was born, built rather. She collected insects and rode horses with two of her brothers, one of whom is my father. These homes were built From what she told us, they were beach houses, quote unquote. They were for the people in the city who wanted to go to the country in Evanston to vacation in their beach home. 548 has 2 bedrooms, 1 small room they use as a bedroom, and 2 bathrooms. There's no air conditioning, a very small garage, a galley kitchen. There was an upstairs that only kids could use at the time because the ceiling height's only about 5 feet 2 inches. I probably don't have to tell you, as Chris mentioned, somebody purchased these 2 lots and split them into 3 so many city families could enjoy their summer, and that was a long time ago. Both neighbors on either side have renovated their homes. The one to the north is a 4-bedroom, 3-bath. One to the south is a 4-bedroom, which includes a full rental unit in her basement. The neighbors have moved their properties into a more code-compliant and comfortable home. I'm slightly embarrassed to say that nothing has really been changed or updated in Aunt Stella's home for probably 70 years. The doorways are very narrow, walls are cracked, the kitchen's not functional, but it works. It's probably the smallest oven you've ever seen, and I invite you to come look at it. The layout is a little awkward, but we love that house. Aunt Stella moved in 1957 with the original owner, whose family purchased the home in 1920, in the 20s. Aunt Stella had a humble but magnificent career at the University of Illinois working as a cytotechnologist, especially with cancer research. She collaborated with many trailblazers in the field in the 30s and 40s. One of her pals, as she would say, was Dr. Papanicolaou and his work with cervical cancer, hence the pap smear. That was his friend, Papanicolaou. That's a little trivia question y'all can use one day. Material things were never important. It was really work and family. So why do I tell you about Aunt Stella? 1, because I love to brag about her, and 2, to explain to this committee that this is not just a home that will be a bit larger than its immediate neighbors, but it will continue to live on with the integrity and love it deserves. We spent birthdays, weekends, holidays, and picnics at 548 Judson. We asked Aunt Stella to update and renovate over the years, but she liked things just the way they were. She never wanted to leave that house, and thankfully she never did. We also took care of her until she died in that home in November of 2016, and she was 98 years old. 6 months prior to that, she was whipping around in her little car, and you'd probably see her over at the Olympics speaking Greek with Stacy over there. She wanted me and my sister to have this home and continue to live and love as she taught us. When you look up and down the street, there's no 2 homes alike. I'd want you to do that. Take a look. 2 houses, as Chris mentioned, is this Italianite style, which is 3,491 square feet in a big garage. People can say this is a quaint little house and why would we tear it down? And trust me when I tell you, when we had, Chris was one of 3 people that we interviewed for this project, and the first 2 came through, the first 2 architects, and when they said that, actually all 3 of them said that, let's see if we can keep Aunt Stella's home, we were elated that we could actually maybe live in the home. But quickly realized that that was just not cost effective and it wasn't going to be something that we could move forward with. So here's what we can promise. Besides throwing the best block party, because I'm kind of an organizer, so I'll throw a big block party that they haven't had on that 500 block. We'll maintain the integrity of civic pride. We'll update the home to come into this century, which will increase beauty and property value. We need fresh and new in Evanston. I'd not insult this committee to say it's a quaint home that fits in this block or a neighborhood. It's a loved home that just got too old to fix. Let us fix it and continue Aunt Stella's legacy. Thank you. I also have a letter from the fellow across the street. I don't know if you want me to read it now or do you want to wait?
You can submit it to my office or right now.
I think it was submitted or right now, handed to you?
Yeah, you could do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, why don't we give members of the public who, it looks like maybe one or two people might have signed up to speak about this matter. Sir, if you'd like to, and if it could, we're going to have to have a thorough discussion of this matter, so if I can just please ask everybody for the courtesy of keeping your presentations brief.
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is Barry Lippa, and I'm here to represent Jerry Shapiro. Due to unfortunate circumstances, Jerry Shapiro cannot be here. She is the owner and occupant for the past 47 years of the house which is directly to the south of the subject property. She is opposed to the demolition of 548 Judson and also the construction of the non-compliant house to replace it. Her opposition is based on the proposal's departure from the goals of the Lakeshore Historic District and also from the requirements of the zoning regulation. I'm going to read part of the statement that she sent to the Commission. First, I want to talk about the demolition of the house at 548 Judson. The subject house, located within the Lakeshore Historic District, is situated at the center of three identically constructed small-scale freestanding wood frame structures. The demolition of 548 would undermine the architectural integrity of this trio of houses. Consequently, the demolition would be opposed to the goals of the historic district. No houses on the block have ever been demolished. Other houses, including 534, 543, 604, 605, etc., have been renovated without departing from the goals of the Lakeshore Historic District. And as a matter of fact, since the establishment of the district, only 4 houses in the entire district have been demolished. As an alternative to demolition and new construction, 548 could be renovated without interfering with the context and architectural integrity of the trio of houses that represent a distinctive section of the landmark block. In Ms. Shapiro's opinion, the demolition would establish an unfortunate precedent that could open the possibility to future new out-of-scale, out-of-character district-wide structures that would undermine the goals of the historic district. Now I want to talk about the house that is proposed to replace it, 548 Judson. Ms. Shapiro's view of the proposed non-compliant house and garage indicates that there wasn't any reasonable attempt to design the proposed house and garage to resemble the size and character of the 2 adjacent houses. On the contrary, the proposal is non-compliant with at least 4 provisions of the zoning regulations. It will result in great out-of-scale, out-of-character structures that would dwarf the 2 adjacent structures. Consequently, the construction would undermine the goals of the historic district. Basically, the replacement structures exceed the provisions of the zoning regulations governing the lot coverage, the rear yard, the eaves, the sidewalk, patio separation, etc. As a consequence, not only would the structure be too bulky for the size of the lot, but they also would only be the only buildings of this type on the block. Finally, the structure's out of context and out of scale design would be apparent to walkers by and evident to the eye to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anybody else who signed up to speak on this matter who would like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Stella Nanos. I am the namesake of Aunt Stella Nanos. And I just wanted to reiterate what my sister already said and address some issues from the neighbor Jerry to the south regarding the sizing of the houses. They're not identical. I'm sure you've done your due diligence and gone down the block. None of the houses are really matching in style or size. It's a very eclectic mix of homes and a very unique block, including a apartment building on the corner that has maybe 20 plus units. So it's not a typical historic district block, I would say, and I don't think anyone would disagree with that, especially with the apartment building on the side. Jerry and my aunts were friends for 46 years, I guess 44 years. And the reason probably why those 2 houses are still as they are is because Jerry still lives there and my aunt just passed 2 years ago. I mean, that's the only reason there's really hasn't been any significant changes on those homes. I understand that Jerry has done some renovations, including installing an apartment for lease in her basement. I'm not sure if that's legal or not, but she's done that. And my aunt has signed off and allowed her to encroach on the property line, being a good neighbor, and I'm sure there's records of that her porch is actually on my aunt's property line. So I think there's a little bit of, I push back on her regard just because her house and that house have not really had any changes because they're both elderly. They were both elderly and they both just didn't make any changes. So I am 100% in favor of this new building. I agree with my sister that we will uphold the historic value and appreciate everything that Evanston offers and thank everyone for their time and commitment to this process.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Were there any other members of the public who, please come up. Have you already signed the sign-up sheet?
I have not.
Okay, maybe we'll let you just sign up or go ahead and sign up.
Okay. Hello. My name is Amy Zan, and I own and occupy 540 Judson with my spouse. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my concerns about the proposal for 548. My house is 2 houses to the south, and so there are the 3 little houses. This is the middle property we're talking about. I'm the next one to the south after that trio. And so within the Lakeshore Historic District, it seems necessary to protect and preserve the existing individual houses in order to preserve the overall historic character of the neighborhood. 548 stands between its adjacent neighbors at 546 and 550, as other people have said. All 3 are small, narrow houses on undersized lots. All 3 are similar with low height, small facades, and front doors that enter from the side rather than facing the street. All 3 are single-family homes. Regarding the proposal to demolish the existing house and garage at 548 Judson, demolition clearly runs contrary to the pursuit of historic preservation and would make a permanent change to the block, our neighborhood, and the historic district as a whole. We, of course, welcome new neighbors to our block who freshen up existing structures through renovation, such as at 605 Judson and what is now in progress at 612 Judson. If the Preservation Commission approves the applicant's request to demolish the house and garage at 548, there are a number of standards for new construction that appear to be violated in the proposal. First is height, which is the most obvious. The Italianate structure that was referred to up there is my house at 540. It's a landmark house, it's a historic house, it's on a double lot of 100 feet wide, so clearly it can accommodate a larger, taller house. A small partial lot of 33 feet wide cannot accommodate a house that's 35 feet tall if its neighbors are low one-story buildings. The plans also include the new 2-story garage with a coach house, which is much higher than the single-story garages on our entire block. The other standards of construction that appear to be violated are proportion of facades, rhythm and spacing of structures on streets. The overall largeness of the proposed house would disrupt the existing rhythm of spacing on the block. The rhythm of entrance porches and projections. The proposed house would have a large, tall, flat facade with a porch and stairs that stick out significantly farther toward the sidewalk than its neighbors. The scale of the structure of the proposed house is way out of proportion to its adjacent neighbors and especially to its undersized lot. 14, the 14th standard of innovative design. The proposed design does not appear to be innovative. Instead, it calls up images of what is happening in the village of Wilmette, where many older homes are being torn down and replaced by large, boxy, higher square footage homes. If 540 is to be demolished, looking at Standard 16 for new construction, I would ask the members of this commission to please impose a compatibility requirement and request a more appropriate proposal in terms of size, height, style, and historical appropriateness. Tearing down a small house to replace it with a much larger one without considering lot size or its impact on the entire Lakeshore Historic District would be a dangerous precedent to set for Southeast Evanston.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Were there other members of the public who signed up to speak? No. I'm sorry, Mr. Charlie, could you perhaps pass
Sure.
this diagram around so everybody can look at it? I mean, you can just leave it. You don't have to. You don't have to be the presenter. Thank you very much.
Can I address some of the issues that were raised just now, or?
Yeah, I think we're going to first discuss demolition. If you want to just take a second to say anything with respect to demolition.
Yeah,
I think
so-
the new home, I think the truth is we'd need to
Sure.
consider the new home. We need a lot more information as to the home and the zoning, so maybe we can just focus on demolition if there's anything brief you wanted to say.
Sure, no, just to, I mean, the existing home is not something we think we can bring up to code, up to functionality, and to do it in a way that's even remotely economical and competitive in the market. The building needs some major work done. And so, the building that we're considering putting in is narrower. It's the same footprint, and or nearly the same footprint, and it is taller. There's no question. But if you look at the graphic that you're seeing there, just on that side of the street, there are a number of buildings, not just the Italianate one, but a number of buildings that are of comparable size, and there are some across the street as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
That's
like me to-
much of a seat.
okay.
Right. Why don't we discuss the demolition? I mean, obviously, if we weren't to approve demolition, then the rest of the discussion would be moot. And I do think, I mean, we can make the decision all at once, but I think we'd need a lot more information about the proposed structure, the zoning issues in order to consider that. But
I'm sorry, could you clarify that? I lost you on
I
that.
mean, I think we have enough information to discuss demolition, at least, subject to anybody having any questions. I think to seriously consider the proposed new home, we would need, I think, better information, both as to the proposed structure, the more detailed comparison to how it fits on the street, and then also the zoning issues I don't think were actually presented.
Well, I agree with you, but what bothers me is that if you can't consider the new house in terms of, because it's all one package here. We've got the new home that's going to replace something. So to only deal with the demolition says, okay, we're perfectly content to have an empty, I'm sorry to exaggerate, to have an empty lot for the time being until someone considers how it's replaced. It seems to me that I would rather have discussed what's going in place of the home that's there rather than let's replace the home that's there with something that's still fuzzy and indeterminate.
Well, I mean, we don't have to vote on a decision. I was just suggesting
No, I
organizationally. I mean, if our opinion is that we're not going to approve demolition regardless, then spending a lot of time further developing the plans and understanding them better is not a good use of time. So I guess that's the first question is, would we, if the new plans were acceptable, would we consider approving demolition?
This isn't I mean, I think Carlos has probably been involved. I know there's been cases of demolition where it's a landmark. This isn't a landmark. This is, I guess we'll say a
The survey from 2011 indicates that it's a contributing structure, but not eligible for landmark designation.
Right.
It's contributing but not eligible for landmark designation. And I think that one thing to remember is that the standards apply the same whether it's a landmark or not in a historic district. So there's no distinction between the two, at least in the ordinance. And I think the commission has the discretion to distinguish, some of the aspects of a non-contributing, non-significant structure. But in this case, the recent or fairly recent survey indicates that it's a contributing structure.
I mean, does everybody feel like that they have had an opportunity to, I know I went and walked around the house and felt like I gained a lot more information by doing that than was really presented in the presentations. So I don't know if people feel they need to see it or they need pictures of how it's situated in the street. I mean, does anybody have any opinion as to whether we would approve demolition or not if the new plans were acceptable?
It's a big if. That's my dilemma. As I said, I think that it's one thing to look at the criteria for demolition, and I think there's been arguments made, or at least the case was presented, that it's not, we don't have the numbers and all the rest, but let's just say that it's not in a condition that warrants, apparently doesn't warrant restoration or renovation or addition or all of the other choices we have. And I'll accept that as a given, right, that the foundation isn't necessarily in good condition, that portions of the rest of it are not in good condition, or at least that's what's been presented to us, and there's been no contrary presentation to that effect, which is the case for the demolition. But then you get into, the other issues, and I think immediately, no matter what I do, I keep going, okay, what's going to take its place?
Well, we're not obligated. I'm not suggesting we have to make a decision without seeing the new plans. I'm saying that I think.
Well, we have.
We haven't made any decisions. We haven't voted on anything. I think for us to seriously consider the new structure and the zoning modifications, I think the presentation the applicant would have to flesh out the presentation a great deal. I know I
agree.
Didn't find the presentation sufficient to make that decision. It just wasn't nearly enough information. However, I don't want to send the applicant back, and we can try and give them guidance as to all the additional information to make a much more complete presentation. If we're opposed to demolition, it could just be a waste of time.
I guess my personal view is that because of the bad condition of the house and the kind of economically infeasible effort that would needed to be for the repair, I guess I'm open to demolition, but I would agree with Elliot that I have major concerns about the new design and the proposal.
Okay.
And that's pretty much what I'm trying to say. I think the difficulty I have is that if you agree with the concept of saying it's demolished, then you're sending them back saying, we've now left it open for you to put something in its place. We're almost committing.
We're not voting.
We aren't
we're not
committing legally,
We're just
but I'm
saying we think it's
we're
worthwhile.
to some extent saying, now that can be removed, now it's come back with something.
Okay.
The way I always interpreted Standard 6 for demolition is basically we kind of have to do both as part of the same vote. We don't approve demolition without also approving the new design.
Actually, generally, we can, they're obligated to present the new design only as a tool for viewing the demolition. But anyway, I think, I agree with the two of you that there's no reason we have to decide demolition. But if most of us feel the way I think Ken expressed, that we certainly would seriously consider permitting demolition, but we need the plan, the plan's much more developed, a much better, more complete presentation. Then I think we should give the applicant that guidance so they can come back with a more complete presentation next time. Do other people, I mean, it seems like the three of us are saying approximately the
I
same.
think we are.
Do other people agree with that or disagree with that?
I agree that the demolition, I don't think is the major question. I think not only with maybe more information for the presentation, I do think that we can provide some I think there's some very major, strong reservations that we all probably have on the new design, and I do think it's our responsibility to say what we would want in the presentation, but also give guidance to those major issues so that we can at least let them work on all of it as much as possible before they come back in front of the commission.
Okay. Does anybody else want to speak to the basically what we're doing issue? Aleka, go
Carlos,
ahead.
do we have the blurb that's the description of the Lakeshore Historic?
It's on the packet. Not the historic district, but the survey.
House.
The survey, yeah.
The houses. But the district itself.
I don't have the information handy here, but
Okay.
I can provide later if you wish.
Okay.
I don't recall seeing, actually I went through it, I don't recall that house being listed in the nomination to the National Register. Some houses are highlighted in the nomination, and this one is not.
It was not.
Yeah. Okay.
Wouldn't that be more common if it had been one of the landmarks within the district than if it's only a contributing member? Or structure?
It will not only highlight landmarks, but the ones that at the time were considered contributing or significant, but it's not listed as neither of those.
So are we segueing to discussing what would have been I guess, the criteria for review of construction?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. Well, I mean, go ahead. That was the end of my question. Well, I think, and it was even brought up by at least one of the people that came up here, I think there is the issue of proportion of the facades, and I think the rhythm of the rhythm on the street, among other things. I think when you look at it, despite the 35-foot height, and I'm just going to mention a couple of things, there's a big difference between the homes, and I forgot what the address is further to the south, where they're much wider houses and yet 35 feet high, so that the proportion is much more horizontal. Where this one is reading as a very vertical structure. It's a very narrow, tall building. And if you look at that long strip that we had, that board, you can see that the tall houses are much more horizontal. Even some of the lower houses tend to be, when you even start, like I was holding it all up, but even if you start at the north end at the apartment building, the first one to the south, they all have a horizontality, and this one is pretty much sticking up as a much more vertical structure. It's not the same kind of proportion as most of the others. So it is, I'm not even talking about the one-story homes. So I think that there's quite a difference there. It's not just the issue of height. Oh, well, we stayed under the 35 feet. But there's a lot of ways to be under 35 feet. And I think it's true of some of the others, the rhythm on the street. And I'm not clear at all. I have to say, looking at the drawings, I'm not sure about material. That wasn't very clear at all. And I think even the level of detailing, I think, Mark, you even indicated about fleshing it out. I look at the roof and all the rest, and it looks very, very simplistic, and there's a lot more level of detail and architectural detail and texture to most of that other stuff that Chris just doesn't show on that drawing. And you're agreeing, but in a sense you were bringing it here for us to approve. not for us to say it's a good idea, come back. I'm not trying to be harsh about it, but this was supposed to be it, not here's where I am right now, and then next time, because there won't be a next time. So I think it needed to be, here's what we're going to do, not here's where we're going. And I think that's really the critical issue. Anyway,
Go ahead, Ken.
Somebody else.
I guess in rethinking kind of what the design of the new house would be, I'd really call your attention to standard 1, height, and it's written as it should be compatible with the essentially the properties to which it's visually related. And while the block as a whole is obviously very eclectic and there's a lot of variety, its strongest relationship is going to be to the two relatively low structures that are directly in very close proximity to it on the north and south. Standard 2, proportion of facades, I think Elliot said that really well. And I'd also look in particular at Standard 10, the overall scale and mass of the structure relative to, again, to the two houses in close proximity. And then separate from that, looking at the zoning variations that were requested, I really think you need to take a hard look at what building a compliant house in terms of lot coverage and impervious surfaces would look like. I'm not offended by asking for a variance to get rid of a parking spot, given that you're a block and a half from the L, but I think if you're starting completely over and starting from a blank slate and building a new house, you really need to make a much stronger effort to fit within the zoning requirements.
Well, I think the only thing I want to say about the parking is that the 3 are a consequence of it being a coach house. And I think that's now come up because of the whole coach house. Scott's probably better at that than everybody else now. But the whole coach house issue, and in fact, I think last night there was even the issue because the rule was that anybody that built a coach house couldn't exceed the height of the major house. And I think they came to the conclusion that it ran into an interesting problem when you had a 1-story home, because you wouldn't be able to build a 2-story coach house without, I guess, putting the parking underground or something. So I think that's now been, I don't know what the new height is, but, so I think that 3rd spot doesn't bother me. I understand going for the zoning on that, and once you commit to the coach house, I think you have to allow it. It's at least not within the coach house. You're doing it in the side yard, and that, I just want to add that isn't troublesome to me.
And just a quick update on that text amendment regarding accessory dwelling units and coach houses was introduced last night at the City Council, so we'll be back for action in January. And if it's approved, a 3rd parking space would not be required for properties within 1,500 feet of transit, which would include this property. So if that's approved, then that variation would not be required.
I also understand that if you said that's a future coach house and never finished the upstairs, you never actually had to put in the 3rd spot. Sorry to leave that as an opening for you, but I'm just telling you. I went through that with Melissa on something I'm working on, that's why. I'm not sure if you agree with that interpretation.
I don't think that's relevant to this case,
Okay.
but we can talk about that later.
Well, if they don't do the coach house.
So, Ken and Elliot have obviously gone through a lot of the major standards and what we are looking for more compliance between the heights and the proportions. I think, to expand on what you had said before with the presentation and how much information it is, I think it would be very helpful to either have a rendering that is a 3D rendering with the adjacent homes modeled as well, so we can really see how the masses fit together in context, or if you'd prefer to do a model with the adjacent properties or the block of some sort. I think either one of those tools it really helps us understand how the massings work together and how the proportions work together. So in that idea that we're going to have this continued and that you're going to come back, if you can bring that information back, I think it would help us understand your volumes and your masses in relation to these standards.
I think, new construction on very eclectic blocks is obviously challenging. I mean, having, again, walked up and down the block a few times, the homes next door are one referent, but they're, clearly the other houses across the street and a little further away are other referents, which I think are, all valid, and we debate these points. I think the, I think the house is more similar to other houses on the block, not the ones next door, and I guess those are, both valid considerations and arguments, but I think you have to develop that. I think it's hard for us, you've heard different people's concerns, but I think it probably is hard for us to really react without a much more defined plan and a much more defined presentation. On the zoning issues, I think if you can justify it, it's something I'd support, but I think it's, I just didn't, I don't really know what you're going to build based on the presentation. It felt to me, I think, as Elliot expressed, it seemed like you were, you wanted to present the demolition and you had to present some plans. And to be honest, when I first saw the presentation, I didn't even think you were applying to build the house yet because there was so little there. And I think if you want to do that, that it needs to be, thought through your well-advanced plans and a presentation. And, with the eclectic style on the block, it's always challenging. There's just different arguments that can be made. And, you've got to make a good presentation.
Well, Mark, Ken referenced, we're always going off the standards, and Ken referenced the standard 6 for demolition, which expressly says we can't give this a certificate of appropriateness. We can't issue one for the demolition until plans for replacement structure or object have been reviewed and approved by the commission. So we have to get more detail on that. And then I think everybody, like to Mark's point, other specific standards have been mentioned. I don't know if anybody mentioned the directional expression of facades on the block, not just next door, but I think taking a close look at all these standards in construction that have been referenced will be key in tweaking the design of the new construction before we can approve the demolition.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
No, I think what she just said is very important, actually, with the standard 6 on the demolition. Ken and I were both kind of hinting at it without literally, I don't think I realized it. I read the accept in, but I haven't realized that when you read the last sentence, we essentially needed to be approving the new before the demo in this particular case. Oops, sorry. Didn't have that on. I don't want to repeat it. But I think that's really important, that you have to realize that with that standard, we really almost have to be approving a new building before we approve the demolition to allow the new building.
Well, I think regardless, the applicant wants us to approve a new building at this point in time, so there's no question about that.
I wanted to say, because somebody mentioned innovative design when they were up here, I think the intent of that is not that this is not an innovative design. It's that that standard is basically saying we're not discouraging innovative design. And I think that's really important, that it doesn't have to be, replicating or duplicating or cloning or whatever else, any of the others. I'm not going to go into the one across the street that's cedar and getting darker and darker by the year. I know all the architects and the original owners, so I know what was going on there. It was kind of an interesting construction. But I think that may have not been, I don't even know if that ever went through the preservation process. It was before you, Carlos. I know that.
Then it probably did not.
Pardon?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that particular case.
It shows up in one of the, I think you had it in one of your photos.
Okay. If you could, Mr. Shirley, if you could return to the lectern for just a minute to Do you think next month, continuing to next month would allow you to develop plans? I mean, I don't know when we'd really have to know by if we continue it.
Well, the meeting is on January 14th, and we also have a holiday in between.
And I will be overseas on January 14th, so
So-
February would be the
To
next date.
February, then?
Yeah, is that
So you-
possible?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome.
Yeah, the limitation we have is the 45-day, but since you are requesting the extension, then we don't have an issue with tabling or continuing the project to February, because it's your request.
Okay, great, thank you.
And again, if you do have questions in the interim, feel free to contact Carlos. I mean, it's definitely the kind of proposal that's going to have to come back to the whole commission.
I understand.
To the extent you can, we can help you be as far along as possible by the February meeting, that, we try to do that.
That'd be great.
So, okay, thank you.
All right, thank you all. Appreciate your comments.
Would somebody like to move to, Susie, would like to move to continue to the February meeting? Or, I'm sorry.
I move that we continue the application for, well, I guess for both demolition and new construction for 548 Judson Avenue, applications 19 Pres 0262 in the Lakeshore Historic District until the meeting of February 11th, 2020.
Okay, a second. Jamie, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Everybody was in favor. Thank you. Thank you.
I forgot to sign my name here.
I think you'd actually signed on the sign-up sheet before the meeting.
That's what's okay?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
I don't think he signed that one.
You did.
Is it David? Oh, okay. Thank you.
Do you want to talk about minutes?
Sure. So you have received, we're talking about moving to approval of minutes for the November 12th. Anyone has additional comments, edits? I received one. I received edits from Julie Hacker and with some other clarifications, which I sent out to your attention. So if you don't have any other comments or edits, can you please let us know if you could make a motion to approve minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes of the meeting of November 12th, 2019, as per any edits and any future edits that may come rolling in to Carlos's office within the next few days.
Second.
Second. Everyone in favor? Abstain? Aleka, did you guys end up meeting with Kumar yet, or is that?
No, we're meeting next Thursday? Is
On the 19th.
19th.
If I may, this is for the task force. So we have a meeting scheduled on December 19th, Thursday in the evening. I believe it's at 6:30 p.m. And we will have the participation of all the three boards, commissions. At least they will have one representative per committee. So we have, I believe, 4 people attending the meeting. And that would be our introduction. We have invited Nate Kipnis, an architect from Evanston, who is very specializes in sustainability and other types of solar and wind energy. And he also has experience working with historic districts. So we thought that he would be a good way to start the meeting and maybe have the members get to know each other as well. So it's at 6:30. It's a public meeting, by the way, so you're welcome to attend if you wish.
So when is it, 6?
At 6:30 on the 19th
Okay, thank you.
of December.
Also, it's not just a group, because it's more than 3 people.
Yes. Oh, we talk about that. We have 2 representatives per committee, but there's 6 people. We just want to go the safe way and make it, and we are putting the on the calendar and so on and so forth, as we would do it for any other meeting.
And then on December 2nd, Carlos and Scott and I met with Gina Robinson about the pitch proposal about the, I guess what Carlos has as potential cultural, some kind of cultural district, probably not formal landmarking in the 5th Ward. And Sally had said she was interested but was out of town, so I don't know if we'll have to, I mean, she's not on the commission anymore, which is not really critical, but we'll have to think about whether somebody else wants to be on that group as well. I think it's probably a fairly long-term project. It's just a lot of work to figure out what can be done. I mean, traditional landmarking, or creating a traditional historic district is probably not what would really be the most helpful. So I think I understand Scott and Carlos are going to go to the Shorefront Alliance and view their archival materials, or?
Yes. Scott, can you let us know when the meeting, or we're going to go next week? Is that Wednesday, I believe? Yeah.
And Dino has
Or Tuesday, yeah.
a great deal of historic material about the structures, probably 2/3 of them in the 5th Ward, but throughout the city. And so we thought we would just try to brainstorm about some way to bring attention to those, and whether it's supplemented by some kind of cultural center, perhaps space and family focus with pictures and other archival material, but some way of really promoting the culture of the 5th Ward. But it's as I said, I mean, I think it's a real interesting project, but it's probably a lot of work and a lot of time to do.
If I may, Sally had volunteered, but we have not been able to get a hold of her, and I don't think she replied either to the visit. So I'm not sure whether her time will allow her. So it would be maybe a good idea to have another volunteer, just to make sure we have enough representation.
How often is it meeting, or how?
We have not really started to plan that ahead. We want to just to get started with Dino, and we have the meeting with him. We were supposed to meet also with the alderman, but she wasn't able to attend. So Dino is going to show us what resources he has. He has research done over the years, and I think his emphasis is basically to be able to somehow recognize the sites and people, particular people that are representative of the African American community in Evanston, not just the 5th Ward. So I'll imagine that, once we have a better understanding what entails to put together a eventual recommendation to the commission, we'll be able to have more regular meetings. I don't think we have a timeline set yet. I don't think we do, but eventually we may, so that we can start and finish within a reasonable period of time. I think what is helpful in my mind is that we are not, or they're not looking for a historic district in a traditional sense. And they don't think we'd like to impose any restrictions that the preservation ordinance would have if you have a district or traditional landmark. It's more a recognition of people and events and sites.
What kind of expertise are they looking for?
I'm sorry?
What What kind of expertise are they looking for?
Well, I mean, if you have a good background in research and also historic preservation or history, and if you have a background in organizing research, I think that would be very helpful. And I think Dino has all those qualities, so he probably would impart his knowledge to whoever volunteer wants to assist.
And you're looking for one or two people for this one?
We are looking as many people, to be honest. When we started back in the original, we have some of the residents were involved. I think in my mind, what is important is that the residents, Dino and the aldermen, will be the ones who basically will teach us what they really want and how they want to be recognized, rather than us trying to follow the traditional, nomination of a historic district. To be honest, I need to learn about that myself in terms of the contributions of the African American community in Evanston. And that's another thing he emphasized, is not just the Fifth Ward. He had some locations he mapped out that go to the downtown, and there are scattered locations. So how do you recognize all that rather than a historic district would be very difficult in itself. I don't know necessarily if some buildings need to be landmarked, but I think their goal right now is the recognition more than anything else, if I understand correctly.
I mean, I find it very important and interesting, and I'd be happy to be involved, but because I'm committed to the other one too, I don't know if I want to be the only person that's involved.
I'm going to remain involved. The history part is very interesting to me, and certainly something I'd like to be involved in and learn more about. As Carlos says, I don't know that, the commissioners can have ideas and try to help out, but I think that's probably ultimately most of what we're doing is just trying to just kind of volunteer some time, and there's no schedule, and it's, funding ultimately is probably an issue at some point, and so it's
way back when, and I can't remember the year, there was an organization on the west side, and I worked with them, and we had I can't remember if it was NEH or NEA grant, and part of it was to identify all of the historic, quote, architectural buildings in that area, on what was called the West Side, which most people think of as the Fifth Ward. I even had a whole group of my students involved, but I don't know whatever happened to all that data. I was trying to figure out if I still have copies of it buried in my attic, but I'm afraid to look. There were various organizations that did it. It's true, it does go beyond it. There were weird, interesting things that we discovered. For example, there was a much higher percentage of home ownership in that part of Evanston than there was at the time in the rest of Evanston. Everybody thinks of all the homeowners living along the lake and all the rest, but it turns out there were no rentals. If you go through the west side, they're all owned, and a lot of them were fourth and fifth generation, let alone, this was a stop on the Underground Railroad. The end of the Underground Railroad, more or less, was Evanston. So a lot of these people have lived there literally all their lives. Now it's probably changed because Evanston's gone in and torn things down, and there's low-cost housing in places where there were old buildings. But there's a whole history of this stuff there. It's true. But it goes all the way. If you go up to what used to be Merle's or whatever, the barbecue place, there's a church there. I think it's the Second Baptist on, is it Sherman or whatever, facing the railroad tracks. And that's a very old, African-American church. I had to ask him where the first was when I where's the first? This is the second. But it is scattered. It is true. And but it is primarily in that part of Evanston. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, the map Dino showed us had structures all in different, particularly in different pockets, including, right, African-American-owned businesses in downtown. I think what we'd at least thrown out in the meeting was that there would be some kind of a district, a cultural center in the Fifth Ward, largely because that's the area which has both the confluence of historic structures and kind of current cultural life. And there, you know, we all just did some online checking in terms of.
Well, we also landmarked the place for them to do this, you realize, about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, no, that was definitely one of their thoughts.
Well, Mark, I'd be happy to
Okay.
help out.
Okay, that'd be great.
For family focus.
Thank you. You want to do the officers for 2020? Okay, so I'm now dealing with the nomination and election of 2020 officers for the Preservation Commission. I had an email from Julie, who is not here, obviously, but she nominated Ken as chair, Mark as vice chair, Alec as the vice chair or secretary, and Susie as secretary. And I mentioned to Julie that Ken has repeatedly said he doesn't want to be the chair unless you change your mind. But that's one of the slate of officers, and obviously I told her that the commission will have at this meeting a slate of officers that you will vote and elect the new or continue with the same.
I think I
and
recommend
you had said
just going with the same.
The same
people.
is the other.
Mark, are you dropping out?
No, I'm just starting to learn what to do.
Yeah, it takes at least a couple years. You're learning
Anyway,
how to be a commissioner. Lip.
Unless Ken wants to do it. Okay, all right, well, that makes it easy. Ken clearly knows more than I do, that's for sure.
You're doing a very good job. I know you're
About that. Learning on the job, that's for sure.
Anyway, so probably you should ask for a slate of officers. Somebody could nominate second, and then you vote. Ask for a formal slate of officers. Somebody wants to nominate. We have
Do you want to do it?
myself.
No, I just make the request, I'm not.
Okay, so we have two suggestions. One is to keep the current slate of officers, and also from Julie Hacker, but we know that Ken will prefer to continue as vice chair, and Elliot also would like to continue as secretary, and it appears that Mark would like to continue as the chair. So I'd like to hear from anyone a motion to accept that slate of officers and to vote for their official reappointment, I suppose. Anybody?
I move that we vote to accept the current slate of officers for the next slate of officers. Does that work?
Mark.
Including Mark as, where are you, chair, Ken as vice chair,
Elliot.
and Elliot as secretary.
So we need a second.
I second that.
Like a second. So we have to vote. So all in favor?
Do we get to abstain because of the conflict?
There won't be enough votes.
Okay, so I'll like a second.
Then we wouldn't have a quorum.
Amy. Okay.
And the design guidelines.
Oh, they are up and running now.
They're now up and running, everybody.
Right. So thank you for your patience. I appreciate that. I have been able to work on it, and Julie was very happy to attest that it's working. So.
And I got the email the other day, and then Jack Weiss, who worked on it, wrote that he couldn't even remember what we had done anymore because it was so long ago that we first did these guidelines.
Right. So I'm going to look at other ways of improving that because I keep reading other materials that perhaps we should include based.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if, if people, now that you see it, if anybody has any thoughts about.
I have not yet gotten any information. I just received a request from someone who would like to get applications or any forms, so that I need to direct that person to that site. And that was today. I just really got an request for that type of information.
Where do you find them?
It's actually most of the page.
It's under Preservation
Should go in the
Commission.
website.
It's in the website.
Yeah, I think
I'll
that-
send you the link to Beth. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You're
I'll send
on.
you the link.
I think that the name has always confused people because the term guidelines, and that was when we first started. I talked to Diane about it at the time as well. I think some people think of it as guidelines that the commissioners are using when we're making our judgments, which ironically, I collected all kind of stuff at the beginning from a lot of other towns, which do exactly that. If the public goes on or an applicant, they actually get some sense of how we view these criteria. But in the end, this became much more a guideline as to, for those who have looked at it, as to how to kind of work your way through the process. It tells you in much better terms where to find the forms, where to do all of the rest. So I'm not sure that the name guidelines is really the proper word for it. And it was a big conflict early on. I think I was the only one that wanted to have guidelines that told you how commissioners kind of thought. It wasn't the problem was, does it become a guarantee? Like, well, they said that this is how they view it. Surprisingly enough, and I could bring it for anybody who wants, there are quite a number of cities in this country that actually put that on their sites.
Yeah, they have their
in a
full-
very good way. Some of the Chicago suburbs as well, even with little drawings. It's like, for those who have seen what, the Department of Interior and all the rest that they show as being examples of what do they mean by scale and continuity and so on. So that when we were referring to these things tonight, there would actually be sort of, this is what we're talking about. He understood, Chris did, but how many other people here did? And I think that's always an issue.
Yeah, I think what the helpful part of it is the links that people can go to, like the National Park Service, the preservation briefs, and
Yeah, they're there.
other communities that have the type of guidelines that you're suggesting. But we also included the actual ordinance, so people can look at the standard for review there as well. And there's other helpful links to different institutions that deal with historic preservation.
There's a lot more links now than there were.
Yeah.
Can we include, and I haven't looked through this
Yeah.
real closely, but things like, you were describing, what we like to see when people bring windows in terms of the existing and the new, like an example of,
Yeah.
this is kind of the type of thing.
A new link, I think I can put for the actual application, which now it needs to be updated for the 2020 fiscal year. So that's something I need to do, very shortly, because people will be asking for applications for January, and I need to update the timeline for or I should say the deadlines for submission of applications for 2020.
But
So-
do those have examples, like actual examples?
And,
Anywhere do we have an actual example? So like in that situation, you could say, look at,
The application for window replacement, it does have the elevation and cross-section.
It
and
does,
it
okay.
does have that, yeah.
I think that one's a really weird case tonight, because he came in with so little last time, and you mentioned, because everybody was like, why are you showing us 3 different vinyl windows? And Carlos had actually told him, I think you had actually said that it's probably not going to fly.
It was to the contractor, like,
But I'm talking about the
Right,
previous
the previous one, yes.
And yet they came in, and I was reading the minutes. The minutes make it very clear, wood or, and it seemed as if, he went to a different contractor and just came and said, I don't think the contractor tonight had any idea of our standards. And in that respect, there's not a lot you can do.
So speaking of that, though, for the retreat, I mean, do we, I mean, there are these practical subjects that come up before us, windows being one of them that I know a lot of us would appreciate. Maybe some of the technically astute members of our commission educating us on. I don't know if we feel we have the resources within the commission to have a few different discussions for a retreat versus, I mean, last year, was really good presentations by, outside speakers, but they weren't that closely related to the day-to-day work we do. I mean, what would you think of having kind of a self-taught with a few different discussion leaders, kind of discussion of issues like windows, new construction, or whatever that we face? Or on the contrary, does anybody have an idea for, people, some of the preservation organizations that could lead us in that discussion?
I think that's one because, and I think that was hinted at last time too. I mean, that seems to be one that just comes up. I mean, I don't know that there's been a meeting where we haven't had at least one window application. Usually, I think they happen in the fall so they can gear up for the spring, and so on and so forth. I mean, there's been some meetings where we had, 3 or 4 of them at least.
Can I just ask, as a newer member, how long, what is the retreat usually? Is it,
In the past, we have retreats that were a couple hours or half a day, depending on the agenda. And they usually took place on a weekend, but I don't know that's still feasible. Julie actually sent some suggestions. One of them was, can we have a way to make the meetings more effective? What are our strengths and weaknesses? Do we all have the grasp of the standards so we can evaluate each project? How can the city better aid us in evaluating each project which comes before us? How has the recent decision by the city council not to allow, by the city not to allow project plans in the submission affected our decisions? And review of the standards, review the standard for new construction and additions, alterations as a group to talk about issues which have come up where things are not clear and allow for multiple interpretations. This exercise will allow for a healthy dialogue where we may be grappling with gray areas but have not had the opportunity to flesh out any confusion. And review of windows, materials which have come before the Preservation Commission. We should have several types of windows at the retreat to physically see the differences between wood, SDL windows, clad SDL windows, and other types, Fibrex, ? And finally, we should review other synthetic materials which appear on the exterior of a building, hardboard, plastics, shingles, etc. So those are things that she wanted to share with you in terms of what kind of things we could talk about at the retreat. In the past, I would invite someone or people who are, specialized in a particular area. We can invite window providers with their products. We did that in the past. In terms of procedure, I think that, or how to conduct the meetings, I think that the workshop we had with CAMP was very important. I think that the people who attended seem to have benefited from that. But really, it's up to you, what direction you want to take from now on, and maybe have certain goals that are achievable for the commission other than the regular meetings. So that's where I'm here to ask for your ideas. whatever you think is most urgent or most beneficial to you to continue your work, we can always put together something.
I think we've heard some good suggestions as far as education and technical improvements and information to do technical review of projects and the review that we typically see in meetings. I think we also wanted, and I think Carlos had highlighted this previously, to do some more forward-thinking work and look at what we can do to promote preservation, to do larger education in the community about preservation. Some of those types of ideas, they're different than just our interactions with applicants that want to make improvements to a particular building. So I think that's something else we could look at and discuss at a retreat.
And I think there's some overlap there. I think the clearer, more educated and clearer we all are on what we will or won't accept in like windows and things like that, the more we can articulate that and we can think of creative ways to get that message out or add to our website or whatever in certain things to make it clearer. I think that anything that will assist in making the process seem more user-friendly and clearer and laid out. It's difficult because every property is different, but to the extent that we can, that would be, I think, a great improvement or continued improvement.
My recommendation would be to have a retreat where we can discuss any issue. I think prioritize would be the educational part of it, because we want to continue maintaining good relations with the community. We have this year a number of controversial cases that will continue to come, I would assume, in the future. Aside from what the commission can learn from other experts to how, the best practices of conducting business and so on and so forth. So I think that's another important element of the retreat to look forward, set some certain goals that are achievable. And education is a large part of it. We have the awards program, and I think that that's been successful, and I'd like for 2020 to have the participation of all commissioners. It's been difficult this year. I don't think for whatever reason we couldn't have all of you present, but have your presence on those events. It's important. People know that you're supporting the project. Some of the goals are sometimes difficult to achieve, although it says in the ordinance that we should look for new nominations and historic districts and so on and so forth. But I think it's also important to remember that we don't have too many situations where, like in the case of the Fifth Ward and the aldermen want something to happen, and we are reacting to it, and hopefully in a good way. But I can imagine how difficult it might be to nominate another district unless the people want it. So how do we motivate people to landmark their own homes or get together and propose a new district?
Well, I think the Fifth Ward is interesting because, the one that we had a year ago, let's call it Family Focus. It's really, I forgot which school it is now. That was one of the few times where something was landmarked not as an architectural landmark. I don't know if it's the only one, but, and you can see where the Fifth Ward has a much better opportunity to say a lot of those homes would have some historic, although historic is tricky because they were running through all these people that went to school there. And it's harder when you simply say the neighborhood has some significance historically as opposed to the individual buildings. I mean, they may say that somebody lived there. I think it's going to be much harder because you could start doing that all over the city. But it's the first time where that became a big issue for the commission because I think everybody agreed it wasn't going to be architecturally landmarked.
Do we feel we could do a self-taught seminar where we appoint group leaders on different subjects who can bring in whatever resources they want versus having, I mean, last year we had was a national,
Camp, you mean?
yeah.
It was this year. This year, in April.
This year.
Yeah.
We had I'm forgetting the name, it's the National Preservation.
That was the National Alliance of Historic Preservation Commissions.
Okay.
They have camp, which was the workshop.
So, I mean, they did a great job, but it was very much an overview. It wasn't, certainly not technical detail and not really all that applied to kind of the day-to-day things
I think
we do.
it varies though, Mark, because the one, I'd gone to the prior one out in, what was it, St. Charles? And that was phenomenal because they did a much better job of educating us on applying criteria. There was a lot more of, here's some examples, and literally people were like, do you think this would be landmarked? And, raise your hand, and eventually you became sensitized to the standards, if you want to call it that. And it was much more effective. These guys didn't do enough of it this time. And that was my criticism of it. But it varies with the presenters as well. And it's a really interesting exercise. It's what you were asking about, what do you show people? They were actually showing us examples. And I would say that in about 3/4 of the instances, most of the people in the room were on the wrong side. I mean, literally, all these people were on commissions and all the rest were like, no, wouldn't landmark it, would have, and all the rest, and we were often wrong. And then we began to realize that we weren't quite understanding the standards the way we should have. Bob Beatty was like a month on the commission. He was stunned by the whole experience because, he had not realized what was involved.
I guess as a contrast to an outside presenter, I would love to see us have, I mean, my thought for this would be some kind of educational session on Windows, which I know personally I badly need, and then discussions on issues that come before us that we don't have an opportunity to talk about in the abstract as particular applications come in. And I think to have that, I mean, certainly I would at least value that opportunity to say, step back and say, for new construction where there's no specific reference, particularly on blocks where there are a lot of new houses or all new houses, what should we be doing? And then we have, of course, all the pressure from the neighbors coming in, and how should we view that? I mean, I would love to see us be able to have that discussion that we just don't have the opportunity to have when people come before us, and maybe feel a little more equipped the next time somebody comes in with a new construction project. Maybe not. It's pretty hard.
Edgemere Court.
I guess what you're getting at is if we have it as kind of a self-taught, to call it that, retreat, we can be much more narrowly tailored to those 2 or 3 hot button issues that are always kind of flummoxing us when we have individual projects.
But I think to be good, like, we should have discussion leaders who, who prepare and have resources, and if somebody's got a great outside speaker on Windows, I mean, that'd be great. I mean, I do suspect some of the commission members know, I know a great deal more than most of us know, and probably could help a lot of us.
Well, when we have a retreat, does that constitute a public meeting?
Yes.
Because of the Public Meeting Act?
Yes.
So everybody else the public can.
I think there's ways to indicate that this is a retreat meant for the commissioners. The public is welcome to observe, because it's not really a meeting, it's a working session. But we can double check with the law department, but that's the way we handled it in the past. We will advertise it, and people, sometimes they show.
You can't meet in the woods.
I think we put it in the calendar, basically.
Required by law.
Yeah. But I think you can always, put some qualifier. It's a working session. Yeah, right. So people say, oh, yeah. No. To me, it is very challenging, the Windows issue, because applicants do not provide information that we require. I don't know how many times I have to go through the same explanation with the same person, and when they come, they don't have what I would think is appropriate, but they have a complete application, you know. So the other aspect of it is, you know, the different materials that are in the market, some of them might be more preservation friendly than others. I asked the State Preservation Office if they have any thoughts about certain materials. For instance, they didn't know anything about Fibrex in the recent past when I talked to them. They also have certain ways of looking at things. For instance, I remember attending one of those sessions, and I don't know, maybe in the last 5 years or so, we talk about 1950s buildings, and they have the asphalt shingle that is, you know, the least expensive before the 3-tab, 30-year. And in their mind, if you were going to replace that roof, it had to be the same, not the 30-year architectural shingle.
They're not 30 anymore.
Right, but they don't fabricate that anymore. But you know what I'm saying? They're trying not to change too many things.
Well, you know, I have a question about that. I mean, tonight when he said, well, he'd gone to the state, you know, and done that, somehow I would rather have seen it start at the bottom and work up, meaning that if some of us, and at least a couple of us may have said, that really should be a standing seam metal roof, which seems more appropriate for that brick building than what he was showing, then that should be then the argument to the state. It shouldn't be the state saying, this is what we think, when they didn't have any context at all. I mean, this guy in Springfield, when I read that letter, I don't think he really understood the context or all of the ordinance involved, and I think that's really unfortunate.
Well, I have to, as somebody that worked at the federal level in that department with the state levels or whatever, the state and the federal people, when they're involved in these tax things, are doing, you know, far more review of documents than we do, site visits, you know, it's far more in depth of a review than anything that we do at the local level. I mean, it would be great if we
It should
did.
emanate from the local and work up and not.
You know, my experience with a project that unfortunately didn't go as good as you might imagine, going through preservation in Evanston. It was a gentleman who bought this landmark. He wanted to demolish it, and I convinced him that probably was not going a good idea to begin with, but also that the standards were not met. Eventually, he changed his mind. And then I mentioned about the the property assessment freeze program to him at some point. And then he decided to restore the house, and he had an attached garage, which he converted into a family room. The only thing he changed were the garage doors to windows. And then he did not apply to the assessment freeze right away. He waited maybe a year or so, and he applied for it. The commission had approved everything. The state did not approve the replacement of the doors for windows. They thought that was the front facade, and I said, well, it's recessed 5 by, it's not your front elevation. So anyway, that's the experience that was very negative for us. And I think since then, I recommended people, I didn't recommend him directly, but in the past, I say, you know, talk to the state first, because we want to know what they think before we go contrary to what they will approve.
Ironically, and I don't know if anybody picked up on it, he was making these comments about, this really doesn't matter as much because it's only from the alley, which meant that I'm talking about the applicant tonight, didn't quite understand that that's also the public way. So he was kind of blowing it off to some extent about this is the alley facade, so why does it matter? And that's why I asked whether or not the state people also looked at it as this is the alley, which is, you know, do you trivialize it when you do that?
Anyway, so what do we stand with the retreat?
Should we try to, I mean, okay, so it sounds like we think we could to not have an outside speaker, at least for the whole program, and then come up with a few topics and volunteers to kind of be discussion leader and or bring in outside expertise. And then last year, did we have a Friday? We had a Friday, I think we had a much of a Friday, like.
Was that?
It was like
Why do
9
I
to
not
3 or
remember
something.
it at
Yeah.
all?
I mean, if a Friday morning could be from, 9 to 12, I think that's reasonable.
What would be convenient for people to do? Is a Friday okay? I mean, can people take off from work if, I mean, probably talking about like,
What month are we talking about?
I mean, maybe we'll do like a Survey Monkey or something, but
Okay.
it would have to be when, around late February or into March? I don't know.
Oh,
When did we do it last year?
well, last year we had the camp was in
Camp.
April.
Do April?
So the camp was our retreat?
No, it was something that I had started to look more into educational programs and started with a commission, and we applied for a grant to do that, to get the,
No, that was April 26th was the camp program.
yeah.
But I was asking about when was there a retreat?
Oh, it's been years.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay. Thought I'd missed something here.
So
Where
doing
was I?
it in
Hanging out at-
April might make sense. Do you want to do like a Survey Monkey, and then we'll put together in the meantime suggested topics and
Okay.
try to get group leaders, and we can all, I'll send you, I mean, I think you've heard it all, but.
And depending on what topics the commission would like to discuss, I might be able to contact certain individuals that might offer some additional information that would be helpful to address your concerns, from window representatives to, I don't know, maybe other people, some are my colleagues in other communities. I will ask, what sources they have or resources they have as well.
Okay. All right. Should we adjourn? I think we should adjourn. Could I hear a motion to adjourn, please?
Move that we adjourn.
Second. All in favor? Thank you. Got a seminar at 7:30 tomorrow.